Chapter 3018. Limestone chessboard. They had already been in the space-time distortion for 10 days. In these 10 days, they had only walked 480 steps, which was about 300 meters. At first, they thought that the distorted zone wouldn't be very big. But now, it seemed that the area of the distorted zone was beyond their expectations. If this distorted land was thousands of meters long, wouldn't it take them years to leave? Look, the space-time ahead doesn't seem to be distorted anymore. Suddenly, Mayuja pointed to the front and exclaimed. Zhuowen hurriedly looked over and saw that a normal passage had appeared about a kilometer away. Seeing that they were finally going to leave this place, the four of them perked up. A month later, Zhuowen's group of four finally left the distorted space and arrived at the normal tunnel. This passageway was not long, and the four of them only spent 2 days to reach the end of the passageway. At the end of the passageway was a stone room that was neither big nor small. There was basically nothing in this stone room. The only decoration was the green stone chessboard in the middle of the stone room. The strange thing was that the chessboard was empty. There was not a single chess piece. This stone chamber is sealed. In other words, this is the end of the passage. There is no other way. Mayuja walked around the stone room and frowned. He was a little depressed. Could it be that the void passages we found in both directions are not the correct exits? Jiang Qixing smiled bitterly. Zhuowen observed the stone room and found that it was too ordinary. However, it was precisely because it was too ordinary that he was even more puzzled. Why would such an ordinary stone chamber be hidden in such a mysterious void passage? Moreover, the void passage had a space-time distortion zone. He had personally calculated the distortion of time and space. It was not a natural formation, but a man-made arrangement. Clearly, it was set up to stop intruders. Apart from that, it was obvious that someone had entered the void tunnel before, but there were no signs of them coming out. Moreover, the traces of entry were relatively new. It was obvious that the person had been in there for less than a month. Since that was the case, when they reached the end of the passage, they should be able to see the cultivator who had just entered this place. Even if that cultivator had died, there should be a corpse left behind. It was impossible for there to be no traces at all. However, Zhuowen had observed that whether it was on the road or inside the stone room, there were no traces of cultivators at all. So where did the people who came in first go? Thinking of this, Zhuowen's gaze fell on the green stone chessboard in the center. He found a strand of hair at the southeast corner of the chessboard. Zhuowen picked up the strand of hair and sniffed it. He smelled a refreshing fragrance. Clearly, this strand of hair belonged to a woman, and it had fallen here not long ago. If the hair was here, then where was the person? Brother Long, I suspect that there is something wrong with this chessboard. Mayuja came to Zhuowen's side and naturally saw the strand of hair in Zhuowen's hand. He took another look at the green stone chessboard and said in a deep voice. Zhuowen looked at Mayuja speechlessly. This fatty must have seen him pick up the strand of hair, and that was why he said that. When Mayuja entered the stone room, he didn't even look at the green stone chessboard. However, Zhuowen didn't care about Mayuja's belated advice. Instead, he put the strand of hair in the palm of his left hand and formed a seal with his right hand, beginning to use the art of heavenly divination. Speaking of which, after entering this place, Zhuowen had used the art of heavenly divination quite frequently. He had a serious feeling that his body was weaker than before. This weakness didn't come from his physical body, but from his perception of his own lifespan. After all, using the art of heavenly divination cost his lifespan. Zhuowen knew that if he wanted to solve the problem of his lifespan, he could only continue to advance his cultivation base and gain more lifespan. Fortunately, his original body had just advanced to an eternal overlord, so his lifespan had been replenished quite a bit. That was why he had been using the art of heavenly divination repeatedly. This strand of hair belongs to Zhongli Haoyan, and I've calculated that this is the real exit. The key is indeed this green stone chessboard, Zhuowen said. How can this chessboard help us leave this place? I don't see anything special about it. Jiang Qixing circled around the chessboard, his eyes full of puzzlement. Mayuja, on the other hand, calmly circled around the chessboard 3 times. Then, he pretended to sit at the side and shook his head. If I'm not wrong, this chessboard should be the foundation of a formation. To be more precise, it should be the foundation of a teleportation formation. The chess pieces on this chessboard should be the key to activating the chessboard. Zhuan interjected. Chess pieces? But there's no chess piece on this chessboard at all. Jiang Qixing glanced at the chessboard, his eyes even more puzzled. Yao Xiangjuan was also puzzled. They didn't know much about formations. Even if Zhuan and Ma Yujie said that this was a formation, they only knew a little about it at most. I'm afraid the chess pieces were taken by someone who came here first. Ma Yujie suddenly cursed the person who took the chess pieces for being immoral. Zhuan also agreed with Ma Yujie's guess. In the process of his deduction, he had indeed deduced this matter. Which one of you has jade stones? The higher the grade, the better. Zhuan said to Ma Yujie and the others. What do you want jade stones for? Ma Yujie asked, puzzled. The chess pieces on this chessboard are refined using jade stones. I plan to refine the chess pieces and place them on this chessboard to completely perfect this formation. When the time comes, we can use this teleportation formation. Zhuan's eyes were calm. Just now, in the divination of the heavenly divination technique, he saw the vague shadow of a person activating the formation in front of the chessboard. Although he couldn't see the figure clearly, he could see the positions of the chess pieces on the chessboard clearly. He guessed that if he could restore the positions of the chess pieces on the chessboard, he might be able to restore the formation that existed in this chessboard. I have a lot of jade stones here. Ma Yujie quickly took out a pile of jade stones from his spirit ring. Seeing these jade stones, Zhuan's face suddenly became gloomy. This was because the jade stones that Ma Yujie took out were ordinary, the kind from the mortal world that didn't have much energy at all. Do you have any creation-grade jade stones? Zhuan asked in a low voice. He felt that the formation of this chessboard was at least of the creation grade, so the jade stones used to make the chess pieces had to be creation grade at least. Creation grade jade stones? Why don't you go rob someone? How could I have them? Ma Yujie put away the jade stones and said unhappily, I know you must have them. This is the key to leaving this place and going to the place where Gongong's body is stored. Are you sure you don't want to contribute some creation-grade jade stones? Of course, if you don't want to, I won't force you. Zhuan said with a shrug. Damn it, Ma Yujie had no choice but to fiddle around in his spirit ring for a while and take out a bag of jade stones to give to Zhuan. Chapter 30:19. Enter. I'll refine the chess pieces first. During this process, you'd better not disturb me, Zhuan said, then went to a remote corner of the stone room. He poured out all the jade stones from the cloth bag and began to refine them one by one. Jiang Qixing, Ma Yujie, and Yao Xiangjuan naturally nodded. Even if Zhuan hadn't said anything, they wouldn't have bothered Zhuan. Zhuan meticulously refined the jade stones into sparkling and translucent chess pieces. There were a total of 361 chess pieces on the chessboard, but Zhuan didn't refine 361 chess pieces. He only refined 200 of them. Relying on the art of divine calculation, he already knew the positions of the chess pieces on the chessboard and knew that there were only 200 chess pieces on the board. Zhuan spent 6 hours and finally refined 200 chess pieces. Brother Long, do you know how to arrange these chess pieces? Yao Xiangjuan asked the question in her heart. I know. Just watch. Zhuan put away the chess pieces and went to the chessboard. Immediately, he began to arrange the chess pieces in an orderly manner on the chessboard. Ma Yujie and the others watched silently with furrowed brows. They didn't know much about chess, so they were a little confused. Even Zhuan didn't know much about chess, so he didn't know much about the arrangement of the chess pieces in his calculation. He only knew how to follow the instructions. Soon, Zhuan had arranged all 200 chess pieces on the chessboard. A powerful aura surged out from the chessboard, as if a giant dragon had just awakened from its slumber. What a mysterious aura. This chessboard seems to be alive. Zhuan, Ma Yujie, and the others couldn't help but take a few steps back when this aura swept out. They looked at the green stone chessboard in amazement. At this moment, the surface of the green stone chessboard was emitting a green light. The chess pieces arranged on the chessboard began to connect together. Soon after, A green line appeared on the surface of each chess piece. A total of 200 lines rushed out of the chessboard and intertwined in the air above the chessboard. These lines began to form and combine, forming a green formation. The surface of the formation was covered with dense patterns. These patterns revealed an ancient and vicissitude aura. From this, one could tell that this formation was definitely not ordinary. This should be a teleportation array, but it's not the teleportation array of our era. The method of setting up the array is very ancient and is rarely seen in our era. Ma Yujie carefully observed the formation that appeared above and explained in a low voice. Zhuo nodded. He knew that Ma Yujie's attainments in the Tao of arrays were much higher than his. He could also see what the latter had said. Let's go. Let's go in. Zhuo was the first to enter the array, followed by Ma Yujie, Yao Xiangjuan, and Jiang Qixing. However, the moment they entered the formation, Zhuo immediately discovered that the teleportation process was actually very slow. This is probably the first generation of teleportation arrays. Each teleportation takes at least several hours. Ma Yujie fell into the formation and quickly noticed the abnormality. He said with a gloomy gaze, "It doesn't matter. We just need to wait in this formation for a few hours." Zhuo did not mind. Just as Ma Yujie said, the formation was finally completely activated after several hours, and the four of them gradually disappeared into the formation. When Zhuo opened his eyes again, what entered his eyes were endless ruins. At the end of the ruins, Zhuo saw a huge figure lying in the void. "We're here." Ma Yujie looked at the huge figure with unconcealable excitement in his eyes. That should be the physical body of ancestral shaman Gonggong. Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing's gazes also fell on the huge figure, their bodies trembling with excitement. "There's someone there." Zhuo's gaze fell below the huge figure. He saw several figures, but because they were too far away, he could not see clearly, so he could not recognize who they were. "I'm afraid it's the cultivators who came in before us. It should be Zhongli, Hao Yin, Yi Qidong, and the others. Of course, the Phoenix People's Saintess and Moses should be there too," Jiang Qixing said. "Let's go take a look," Zhuo said, and led the three of them forward. This space was not big, and it was surrounded by a zone of nothingness. There was nothing in it. In this space, the only thing that existed was the huge corpse of Gonggong floating in the void. Below Gonggong's corpse was a huge square carved from white marble. There were 12 huge white stone pillars in the square, and in the center of the square, surrounded by the 12 stone pillars, was a rather huge altar. The altar was circular and had 3 levels in total. At the top of the altar, there were many bone flags. These bone flags fluttered in the wind, and a mysterious aura drifted out. There was a layer of light blue energy barrier around the square. At this moment, there were more than 10 figures standing outside the square. These figures were divided into 2 groups and stood on both sides of the square, faintly showing signs of confrontation. Among them, the smaller group was the human clan. There were only about 5 of them. Among the 5, Zhuo had only seen the 2 leaders, Zhongli Hao Yin and Yi Qidong. As for the other 3, Zhuo did not know them at all. The number of people from the other clan was twice that of the human clan. There were 10 of them, and the leaders were the Phoenix People's Saintess and Moses. "Saintess, what do you mean by this? Do you plan to fight us outside the square?" Zhongli Hao Yin's beautiful eyes fell on the veiled Phoenix People's Saintess, and her voice was as cold as winter. "The body of ancestral which Gonggong is ours. You have no right to touch it." The Phoenix People's Saintess said arrogantly. Zhongli Hao Yin sneered and said, "You do have the advantage in numbers, but you're still lacking if you want to take us down. Also, you other clan are not good at formations. You think you can break the defensive formation on the surface of the square?" At this point, Zhongli Hao Yin's mouth was full of mockery. Sure enough, after hearing this, the Phoenix People's Saintess frowned and fell silent. Moses, who was standing beside the Phoenix People's Saintess, had a fierce look in his eyes. He said coldly, "We'll cripple you and make you our slaves. Do you dare not break the formation for us?" "Moses, you're very arrogant. Do you really think that the human clan is easy to bully? Yi Qidong was so angry that he laughed. He stepped forward and looked coldly at Moses. He continued, "Do you have the guts to fight me? Hee hee, why wouldn't I?" Chapter 30:20. Cooperation. Speaking of which, Moses had always looked down on the human race. He felt that the gap between the human race and the alien race was too great. Yi Qidong's cultivation was indeed not bad, and after entering the door of darkness, he had even broken through to the peak of the creator stage by chance. However, Moses didn't think much of it. He was also a peak creator stage expert, and one with a powerful bloodline at that. His strength far exceeded that of the peak creator stage experts of the human race. In front of him, this Yi Qi tunnel was really nothing. Bang, bang, bang. In just an instant, Moses and Yi Qidong collided, and then separated. Moses landed on the ground and looked at Yi Qidong, who had also landed in front of him. His gaze became very serious. "You're just a human. How can you be so powerful? You're actually on par with me." Moses's eyes flashed fiercely. "Don't think that only you alien races can be invincible in the same realm. Don't look down on others." Yi Qidong's gaze was cold, and his voice was calm. Moses looked deeply at Yi Qidong and smiled faintly. "Just now you clashed head-on with me. You must have suffered some injuries. Haha, then you and I can fight again and see if it's what you think it is," Yi Qidong said unconcernedly. Moses fell silent. Just now, when he clashed with Yi Qidong, he felt that Yi Qidong should have fallen into a slight disadvantage. He guessed that Yi Qidong must have suffered some injuries, but Yi Qidong had forcibly suppressed them. Of course, this was purely his guess. If Yi Qidong wasn't injured and he attacked again, it wouldn't be good. He definitely wouldn't be able to defeat Yi Qidong in a short time. Just as Zhongli Haoyin said, there weren't many alien races who understood formations, and they didn't know much about the formations around the square. If they relied on them to break the formations, it would probably take forever. Thus, they still had to rely on Zhongli Haoyin's help. This was because they remembered that the genius of the Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower, Situ Liangji, on Zhongli Haoyin's side, was a creator stage divine array master. He was more proficient in formations than anyone here. If the foreign races could completely crush the human race and suppress the human race, they could teach the human a lesson and capture Situ Liangji alive to help them break the formation. Unfortunately, even though the human race had fewer people than the foreign race, they weren't much weaker. Once the two sides started fighting, they would have to pay a huge price. It was obviously not worth it. Just as Yi Qidong and Moses were about to draw their swords, the Phoenix people's holy maiden suddenly opened her mouth and said, "There's no need for the two of you to harm each other. Our humankind and the non-humankind are still allies, so we naturally need to work together and help each other. We have to work together to completely break this formation. Otherwise, it will be difficult for any of us to succeed." Zhongli Haoyin sneered and said, "Didn't the holy maiden arrogantly say that she wanted to cripple all of us and make us your slaves, and then unconditionally break the formation for you? What happened now? Are you admitting defeat?" The Phoenix people's holy maiden frowned. She didn't like Zhongli Haoyin's tone and shook her head. "I was just joking. Now that the human race and the non-humankind are still allies, we have to work together and work together, right? Hee hee. Do you really think that our humankind and the non-humankind are allies?" Suddenly, a clear voice full of sarcasm sounded, attracting the attention of the humans and non-humankind outside the square. The Phoenix people's holy maiden, Zhongli Haoyin, and the others all looked in the direction of the voice and saw 4 people walking towards them. The person in the lead was a young man with 2 scars on his face, and there were 3 people behind him. One of them was an extremely fat man who attracted a lot of attention. Other than the fat man, the other 2 were a man and a woman, and the voice just now was naturally from the woman. "You must be Junior Marshal Sister Yao from the Heaven and Earth Divine Sect." Zhongli Haoyin's beautiful eyes fell on Yao Xiangjuan, and she couldn't help but exclaim with joy. The human race had too few people, so they were at a disadvantage against the non-humankind. However, With the addition of Zhuowen's group, they were more confident. The Phoenix people's holy maiden and Moses also saw Zhuowen's group of 4, and their brows furrowed slightly. I didn't think that Senior Marshal's sister Zhongli would still remember me. I'm so happy. Yao Xiangjuan bowed towards Zhongli Haoyan. Zhongli Haoyan immediately helped Yao Xiangjuan up and hurriedly told them not to be overly courteous. Then, Zhongli Haoyan looked at Zhuowen and said, I remember that you're called Long One, right? Zhuowen glanced at Zhongli Haoyan and nodded. That's right. Miss Zhongli's memory is indeed outstanding. I'm impressed. Zhongli Haoyan smiled slightly and didn't mind Zhuowen's slightly flattering words. Instead, she said in a deep voice, When I was in the Starry Sky Tower, I accidentally saw a name on the Starry Sky contribution list. I remember that name was also called Long One. In a short time, this name soared from the 70s to the 35th place. At that time, I was quite curious about this Long One. I just don't know if that Long One is you. Zhuowen smiled slightly and said, What do you think, Miss Zhongli? It should be you. Zhongli Haoyan smiled faintly. Zhuowen nodded and didn't deny it. Back then, the name he had engraved on the Starry Sky token was Long One. The reason why his ranking soared so quickly was probably because he had killed Sauron at that time. That was why he had obtained so many points, causing his ranking to soar. At this moment, Yi Qidong also came to Jiang Qixing's side and said something to him. Seeing the two of them talking and laughing, they should be reminiscing about the past. Right? Who is this person? Suddenly, Zhongli Haoyan's beautiful eyes fell on Ma Yujia, who was behind Zhuowen, and a trace of doubt appeared on her face. She knew most of the human cultivators who entered the door of darkness, but this fatty in front of her was extremely unfamiliar to her. She had no impression of him at all. This fat lord is called Ma Yujia, a rogue cultivator. In the future, if you follow this fat lord, you will be able to eat and drink well. Ma Yujia patted his chest and said. Zhongli Haoyan smiled slightly and ignored Ma Yujia. Obviously, she thought this fatty was bragging. Of course, only Zhuowen knew that Ma Yujia wasn't bragging. This fatty's origin was too mysterious, especially the ancient era that the fatty mentioned. This made Zhuowen very curious. What kind of place was that? Chapter 3021. Probe formation on the human side. Apart from Zhongli and Haoyan, no one else spoke to Zhuowen, including Ichido. They didn't even greet Zhuowen. Zhuowen deliberately saw the contempt in the eyes of the other humans. Clearly, the eternal overlord aura he revealed was too weak, so they didn't care too much. Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing were more popular than Zhuowen and Ma Yujia. A few people often went over to talk to them. Jiang Qixing's cultivation level was at the mid-stage of the Genesis Overlord realm. Although it wasn't very high in this team, he was still a Genesis Overlord and naturally received the approval of the others. As for Yao Xiangjuan, although she was only an eternal Overlord, she was simply too beautiful. Her beauty could cause the downfall of nations. Even third-step Dao Vindication cultivators would have a good impression of her and try to get close to her. Zhuowen didn't care about the other people's attitude towards him. His gaze had already landed on the foreign race team opposite him. The veiled holy maiden of the Phoenix people couldn't help but narrow his eyes slightly. The Phoenix people's holy maiden also noticed Zhuowen's gaze. She glanced at Zhuowen and frowned slightly. Clearly, she was a little dissatisfied with the way Zhuowen was looking at her. Little bastard, if you look at our holy maiden again, do you believe that I won't beat the shit out of you? Moses stood in front of the Phoenix people's holy maiden and looked at Zhuowen with an unfriendly scarlet gaze. He didn't hide his murderous intent towards Zhuowen. Little bastard, who are you scolding? Zhuowen mocked. Zhuowen didn't give Moses any face. Moses was certain that Zhuowen had killed Zorro. Before entering the door of darkness, Moses had threatened Zhuowen that he would kill Zhuowen in the door of darkness. The two of them were already in a state of irreconcilable hatred. If Zhuowen still gave him any face, he would really be despicable. Of course I'm scolding you, Moses blurted out. However, he quickly realized that something was wrong. Long One had actually set a trap for him. You're courting death. Moses' face instantly turned ugly. He stomped his right foot and charged toward Zhuan. However, the instant Moses arrived at Zhuan's side, Zhongli Haoyan had already made her move. Her palm blasted out like a fuse. Zhuan saw with his own eyes that the instant Zhongli Haoyan's jade-like palm landed on Moses' fist, a very mysterious, sparkling light erupted. Moses gave a muffled groan as he was sent flying backward. He forcibly twisted his body in midair and barely managed to stop himself in the middle of the non-humankind army. However, the moment Moses landed on the ground, he staggered a little and his cheeks flushed red. Moses looked at Zhongli Haoyan with fear. The latter's strength had shocked him. She was actually stronger than Yi Qi Dong, and not just by a little, but by a lot. Zhuan silently looked at Zhongli Haoyan's back, his gaze very solemn. The energy that Zhongli Haoyan had unleashed in that instant had caused him to be extremely fearful. It was as if he hadn't faced a lord of creation, but a genuine lord of creation cultivator. However, he knew that Zhongli Haoyan couldn't possibly be a lord of creation. She should be around the half-step lord of creation. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to enter the door of darkness. From this, it could be seen how terrifying Zhongli Haoyan's battle prowess was. It was still somewhat beyond Zhuan's expectations. Even the Phoenix people's holy maiden's expression became much more serious. She looked deeply at Zhongli Haoyan as if she wanted to see through her. As expected of a #1 genius on the universal contribution ranking, Zhuan muttered to himself. He felt that Zhongli Haoyan was indeed amazing. Even he couldn't help but admire her talent. Zhongli Haoyan, what is the meaning of this? Moses stabilized himself and suppressed the anger in his chest as he growled at Zhongli Haoyan. Zhongli Haoyan looked at Moses indifferently and said, "You attacked our friend without any reason, and now you're asking me what I mean? Don't you think your question is very idiotic? This kid doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He actually dared to humiliate me. What's wrong with me teaching him a lesson?" Moses said angrily, "You attacked my friend, so why can't I help my friend?" Zhongli Haoyan sneered. Moses fell silent. Zhongli Haoyan was right. From Zhongli Haoyan's point of view, helping Long One was a matter of course. However, Moses was very indignant. He knew that Long One was Sauron's murderer. Right now, he wanted nothing more than to tear this person to pieces to vent his anger. However, he knew that he couldn't do it now. I can only wait for this kid to be alone before I capture him. At that time, I'll make him suffer a fate worse than death. Moses thought to himself. He calmed down and returned to the alien race team. He didn't say anything else. Moses was too impulsive just now. I apologize to Miss Zhongli here. Next, let's discuss how to break this formation and enter the square. That's the right way. The holy maiden of the Phoenix people smiled and bowed to Zhongli Haoyan. However, she completely ignored the victim this time, Zhuan. Zhongli Haoyan's anger had also subsided. She nodded and said, "It's fine. The array formation in this plaza is of a high level. Among us, only Brother Situ knows about arrays. He's also a god of creation stage array formation master. Let him take a look. Then we'll have to trouble Miss Zhongli. If there's anything we can do for you, just let us know." The holy maiden of the Phoenix people said with a smile. "Let's see what Brother Situ has to say first." Zhongli Haoyan shook her head and immediately looked at the handsome man standing on the other side. This man was about 30 years old. He was mature and steady. He wore a long white robe and had a very pretentious demeanor. This man was Situ Liangji. When he saw Zhongli Haoyan looking at him, he nodded slightly with a hint of arrogance in his eyes. Situ Liangji walked slowly to the edge of the plaza. With a wave of his sleeve, more than 10 array flags were summoned and surrounded him. "When I'm exploring the array formation, no one is allowed to disturb me." After saying that, Situ Liangji formed a seal with his hands and closed his eyes. He began to carefully explore the array formation in this plaza. Mysterious ripples spread out from the array flags around Situ Liangji. Zhongli Haoyan and the Holy Maiden of the Phoenix people led their own people and retreated 100 meters. They tried their best not to disturb Situ, Liangji's exploration of the array formation. Zhuowen looked at Situ Liangji's exploration of the array formation and could not help but shake his head secretly. Situ Liangji's exploration of the array formation was not wrong, but the direction was wrong. The array formation outside this plaza did look like a defensive array. However, if one observed it carefully, they could see that the array formation was actually changing. In essence, this array formation was not a defensive array. It was a terrifying and powerful killing array. Moreover, there were traces of a trapping array in the changes of the killing array. If Zhuowen's guess was right, this should be a powerful trapping array. Situ Liangji's exploration of the array formation was in the direction of the defensive array. This was completely wrong. However, Zhuowen did not speak. He knew that if he spoke now, he would definitely be dissatisfied with Zhongli, Hao Yin, and the others. Moses would even have an excuse to deal with him. Although he was not afraid of Moses, after all, his doppelganger was still cultivating in the macro world. With the strength of his original body, there was still a big gap between him and Moses. My doppelganger should be advancing soon. As long as it advances, I will not be afraid of anyone here. Chapter 30:22. Fatty attracting hatred. Ma Yujia, who was standing beside Zhuowen, couldn't help but sneer when he saw Situ Liangji's technique. However, Situ Liangji still restrained himself. Otherwise, he might have attracted the attention of Zhongli, Hao Yin, and the others. For hours later, Situ Liangji waved his sleeves and collected the array flags. He stood up with a solemn expression. "Brother Situ, how is it?" Zhongli, Hao Yin, and Yiqi Dong hurried over when they saw the solemn expression on Situ Liangji's face. Zhongli, Hao Yin, even asked. On the other side, the Phoenix people's holy maiden, Moses, and the others also came over. They wanted to hear what Situ Liangji had to say. Situ Liangji let out a sigh of relief. He immediately said in a deep voice, "The great formation around this square is not simple. Just now, I checked it and found that the weak points of this great defensive formation are scattered. I'm afraid it won't be easy to find the weak points of this great defensive formation in a short time." Zhongli, Hao Yin, the Phoenix people's holy maiden, and the others were slightly disappointed when they heard Situ Liangji's words. "It's fine. This array is not simple. Brother Situ, you don't have to feel burdened. We will discuss it again after you rest for a while," Zhongli, Hao Yin, said with a smile. Situ Liangji's eyes were calm. He said, "This array is not as difficult as you think. As long as I have enough time, it is only a matter of time before I can break it." Zhongli, Hao Yin, the Phoenix people's holy maiden, and the others' eyes lit up. "I will rest for a while. After I recover, I will try again," Situ Liangji said to Zhongli, Hao Yin, and Yiqi Dong. He ignored the others and took out a futon. He sat down cross-legged to recover. Probing an array required a divine array master to use his mental energy and divine sense to check the path and direction of the array. It was a very tiring method. Zhongli, Hao Yin, and the others knew how tiring it was to probe the array. They didn't disturb Situ Liangji's recovery. Ma Yujia looked on coldly from the sidelines. He chuckled and said in a low voice, "You've gone in the wrong direction from the beginning. No matter how hard you try, how can you possibly break the formation?" Ma Yujia's voice was as soft as possible, but Situ Liangji's hearing was obviously good. His ears twitched, and he immediately opened his eyes. He looked coldly at Ma Yujia and said, "What did you just say?" Situ Liangji's shout was very loud, which immediately attracted the attention of both the humankind and the non-humankind. Zhongli, Hao Yin, and Yiqi Dong also looked over in confusion. The two of them had been rather far away earlier, so although they had heard Ma Yujia's voice, they had not clearly heard what Ma Yujia had said. Now that Situ Liangji had shouted, it naturally attracted the attention of the two of them. Ma Yujia cast a sidelong glance at Situ Liangji, but he was not afraid at all. Instead, he coldly looked back at Situ Liangji and said, "What? I'm just complaining." "Are you complaining about me? Don't think I don't know." Situ Liangji's gaze was very unfriendly. He looked at Ma Yujia, and his tone was as cold as the winter. Ma Yujia shrugged and said, "What I said is indeed the truth. When you were exploring the formation, you did indeed go in the wrong direction. Among those present, not only did I see it, but this long one beside me should also have seen it." Ma Yujia very immorally betrayed Zhuowen, and he pointed at Zhuowen beside him and chuckled. Zhuowen was speechless. This damn fatty was really as sinister as before. He actually dragged him into the water without saying anything. "It has nothing to do with me. It was this fatty who said it. I didn't say you went in the wrong direction." Zhuowen hurriedly waved his hand. Situ Liangji glared at Zhuowen. Obviously, he also hated the latter. "The two of you were originally in the same group. Our team kindly accepted you, but you came to belittle me like this?" Situ Liangji said furiously. Zhongli Haoyin hurriedly came over to smooth things over and said, "Brother Situ, this should be unintentional as well. Don't take it to heart too much." Situ Liangji sucked in a deep breath and said to Zhongli Haoyin, "Haoyin, I know that you're kind-hearted, similarly of the human race. Accepting them is actually nothing much. But this fatty and this knife-scarred man seriously don't know the immensity of heaven and earth to actually point fingers at me. Could it be that they are formation path God masters too? Furthermore, even if they are indeed formation path God masters, how high can their standards be? Coming over and pointing at me. Who the hell do they think they are?" Situ Liangji jabbered on endlessly, faintly showing signs of not giving up. Zhongli Haoyin was rather embarrassed. Rather, it was Ma Yujia, this fatty, who was not afraid in the slightest, retorting sarcastically, "You don't say. I'm a formation path God master. I'm much more superior than you, this dabbler." Ma Yujia, this guy's ability to pull aggro was getting stronger and stronger. This sentence thoroughly infuriated Situ Liangji. Situ Liangji suddenly stood up and said to Zhongli Haoyin, "Haoyin, today, I'm irreconcilable with these two people. If you don't chase these two people away today, then I'll leave myself." Zhongli Haoyin had a headache. How did things develop to this point? Zhuowen also had a lot of headache, glaring fiercely at Ma Yujia. It was fine if this fatty pulled aggro himself, but he actually even pulled aggro onto him. It was seriously too much of a scam. You can get lost already. How can your bit of formation path standards break this array formation? Ma Yujia boasted shamelessly. Zhongli Haoyin said coldly, "Enough, have you said enough? Brother Situ is our only creation-level formation path godmaster here. Your tone is also a little too big, right?" Zhongli Haoyin's words were said to Ma Yujia. Clearly, she started to show her might, targeting Ma Yujia, this fellow. After all, this fatty's mouth was seriously too smelly, daring to say anything. "Yo, big sister, are you trying to chase me away? Let me tell you, if you chase me away, that's the biggest mistake of your life. This array formation might not be able to break this trash at all, but to me, that's a small problem that's easily solved." After Ma Yujia finished speaking, he even shook his head, feeling good about himself, and winked that pair of small eyes at Zhongli Haoyin. Zhongli Haoyin's face was full of black lines. Forcefully suppressing the anger in her heart, she said coldly, "I didn't have the intention of chasing you away, but want you to shut up? Don't tell me you don't have ears." Situ Liangji stood behind Zhongli Haoyin and said with a sneer, "Haoyin, this damn fatty actually said that he can easily break this array formation. This is simply a joke. Do you really think that he's a creation level or even higher formation path godmaster? At least much better than you, this trash." Ma Yujia shrugged and said. Chapter 3023. Demand, haha. Do I have to break through the formation just because you asked me to? Wouldn't that make me lose face? Ma Yujia crossed his arms before his chest and gazed at Situ Liangji in a calm and composed manner, and the disdain and contempt in his eyes were extremely dense. "Ha! You said you can break through the formation, yet you refuse to do so now. Your lies are really worthless." Situ Liangji started laughing from extreme anger, and then he gazed at Zhongli Haoyin and said, "Haoyin, he's an arrogant person. You should drive him away now." Of course, if you're too embarrassed to make a move, then I can do it. I won't take anyone's life, but you probably won't say anything if I cripple him, right? As he spoke, Situ Liangji walked slowly towards Ma Yujie, and the killing intent in his eyes seemed material and wasn't concealed in the slightest. Who said I won't break through the formation? I'm just saying that you don't have the qualifications to make me break through the formation. Ma Yujie didn't care about Situ Liangji, who came over aggressively, and he still courted death as he said, "How about this? I'll barely join forces with Long One to break through the formation today. If we're able to break through the formation, then you could just kneel before me and call me and Long One Grandpa, and then kowtow 3 times. How about it?" Situ Liangji stopped moving and gazed at Ma Yujie as if he was looking at an idiot, and then he said coldly, "Is there even a need to compete? You'll definitely lose. If you lose, then you have to call me Grandpa 3 times and crawl between my legs." "Huh, of course." Ma Yujie strode forward arrogantly and arrived by Situ Liangji's side, and then he patted the latter on the shoulder and said earnestly, "Be prepared to call me Grandpa." As soon as he finished speaking, the fatty gestured towards Zhuan and said, "Brother Zhua, let's break through the formation together." Zhuan was slightly speechless, and he said in a low voice, "There's no benefit in making him call me Grandpa. I won't do that." As soon as Zhuan said that, Situ Liangji almost fainted. He thought that this guy was a man of few words, but it was said that his words were even more annoying than this fatty's. Ma Yujie smiled cunningly, as if he already knew that Zhuan would say this. He looked at Zhongli, Hao Yin, and the saintess of the Phoenix people and chuckled. "You two should be the leaders of the human and non-human teams respectively, right?" Zhongli, Hao Yin, and the Phoenix people saintess looked at Ma Yujie at the same time. Their brows furrowed slightly. They didn't know what this fatty was trying to say. "What's wrong? Could it be that you have other requests to break the formation?" The saintess of the Phoenix people said coldly. Could it be? Could it be that I'm going to break the formation for free while the two of us work ourselves to death to break the formation without any benefits? Ma Yujie said with a faint smile. Zhongli, Hao Yin, shook her head and said in a deep voice, "Let's continue watching." Situ Liangji had no choice but to give up. However, when he looked at Ma Yujie, the murderous intent in his eyes became even more intense. Ma Yujie just sneered and ignored Situ Liangji. After 2 hours, Ma Yujie suddenly changed the seal with his hands. The formation flags around him rushed out and turned into many directions, rushing into the formation at the edge of the square. Swoosh! Swoosh! The moment these array flags entered the array, the entire array barrier began to tremble. Soon after, a sharp killing intent surged out from the array. Chapter 3024. Fatty shows his prowess. Long when Ma Yujie opened his eyes and shouted at Zhuan. Zhuan nodded and waved his sleeve to summon 9 beast bone array discs. He threw out the array flags, and the murderous spirit was suppressed by Zhuan's array flags. Ma Yujie took advantage of this opportunity to stand up and take a few steps back. Bang! Zhuan also took a few steps back. The murderous spirit burst out and blasted Zhuan's 9 beast bone array discs away. At this moment, the array that was originally restrained became violent. The murderous spirit raged like a storm. Zhongli, Hao Yin, and the others also noticed the sudden appearance of the murderous spirit. Naturally, they retreated and stayed away from the array. Is this really a trap and kill array? Zhongli, Hao Yin stared blankly at the formation that had suddenly gone berserk, and she spoke with slight disbelief. Situ Liangji's expression changed drastically. He stared at the array and was so scared that he could not help but step back. But soon, Situ Liangji came back to his senses. His face was extremely gloomy. He looked at Ma Yujie's back and his eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. I have said just now that this idiot explored the array in the wrong direction. But this idiot just did not believe me and said that I was slandering him. Ma Yujia let out a long breath and laughed evilly. From time to time, he would glance at Situ Liangji, who was not far away and did not look good. Humph! You have just explored the real array. As for whether you can break this array, it is still unknown. Don't be complacent too early. Although Situ Liangji's skills were not good, he was a genuine divine array master at the Genesis level. He could tell at a glance that the array in front of him was not an ordinary Genesis level array. Moreover, this trap and kill array was an array within an array. It was not that simple. You don't have to worry about it. Ma Yujia shrugged and strode toward the array. At the same time, he took out one array flag after another from his spiritual ring. He actually took out 108 array flags in one go. These array flags were arranged around Ma Yujia's body like stars revolving around him. Bang! The murderous intent on the surface of the formation was blocked by the 108 formation flags. Brother Joie, I'll help you fend off these murderous intents. Go and find the array base of this formation. As long as you find the array base, we can work together to completely break this formation, said Ma Yujia. Zhuowen knew Ma Yujia's intention. He followed behind Ma Yujia, and, at the same time, he used the infinity of primordial chaos to deduce the approximate location of the array and the key points of the array. With Ma Yujia blocking in front, Zhuowen's search for the array base went exceptionally smoothly. In just an hour, he found the array base of the killing array. I've already found the killing array's foundation. Everyone, attack this place together. Zhuowen pointed with his right hand, pointing out the position of the array foundation of the array formation, and shouted to Zhongli, Hao Yin, and the others. Let's attack together. Zhongli and Hao Yin hurriedly joined forces with Yi Qidong and the others, attacking together in the direction that Zhuowen had pointed out. The Phoenix People's Saintess did not dare to be negligent. She commanded everyone to attack together. Bang! 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 Terrifying attacks blasted out one after another, landing on the position that Zhuo had pointed out. Immediately, the array shook violently and collapsed. After the formation collapsed, the terrifying murderous intents immediately dissipated. We've already broken the formation, Zhongli and Hao Yin said excitedly. Not yet. We've only broken the killing array. There's still a trapping array within. Zhuowen said calmly and continued to use the infinity of primordial chaos to explore the entire formation. Zhongli, Hao Yin, and the others all calmed down. They also saw that other than the murderous intents dissipating, the barrier had yet to disappear. After several hours, Zhuowen finally made a move and pointed out another direction. Zhongli, Hao Yin, and the others did not dare to be negligent. They all attacked together in that direction. After a while, the last trapping array was completely destroyed. The invisible barrier that had appeared at the edge of the square finally shattered and collapsed. We've finally broken the formation. Zhongli and Hao Yin revealed a trace of an excited smile. Even Yi Qidong, who was serious in speech and manner, revealed a relaxed smile. Ma Yujia also revealed a relaxed expression. He immediately looked at Situ Liangji with a mocking gaze. Situ Liangji also saw Ma Yujia's gaze, and his face turned green. I say, come to Grandpa's side. Kowtow to your grandpa 3 times. Ma Yujia hurriedly waved at Situ Liangji, causing Situ Liangji, who originally wanted to retreat, to change his expression greatly. His eyes were filled with anger. Damn, fatty. Aren't you going too far? Have you been playing with me from the beginning? Situ Liangji glared at Ma Yujia, his tone gloomy and terrifying. What? Are you going back on your word? Ma Yujia's eyes darkened as he said casually, You were the one who set a trap for me to kneel down to you. Don't even think about it. Situ Liangji sneered. He immediately kicked out and rushed towards Ma Yujia. His right hand formed a palm and blasted towards Ma Yujia's face without hesitation. Situ Liangji's face was ferocious as he said coldly, Damn fatty. You dare to play with me? You have to pay the price. Ma Yujia's eyes were cold as he said indifferently, A mere mid-stage god of creation trash dares to be arrogant in front of me. As he spoke, Mayujia's right palm suddenly blasted out. There was no fluctuation of the power of the heavenly Tao. This guy directly blasted out with his physical body. Zhuo knew very well that Situ Liangji was finished. Ma Yujia's origin was too mysterious, especially his physical body. Even he was afraid of him. Previously, he had been at a disadvantage when facing this guy head-on with his peak 5-star Panga's sacred body. It could be seen that Ma Yujia's physical body was much more terrifying than many alien races. He was definitely not an ordinary person. Crack! Ma Yujia's palm broke Situ Liangji's right palm. Then he suddenly raised his left hand and ruthlessly slapped Situ Liangji's face. The poor Situ Liangji was directly stunned by this palm. He was sent flying and smashed into the ground, twitching continuously. Ma Yujia strode in front of Situ Liangji and grabbed his shoulder, forcing him to kneel in front of him. It's time for you to keep your promise. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. Ma Yujia's eyes were filled with killing intent. Situ Liangji was frightened and trembled. He hurriedly kowtowed 3 times to Ma Yujia and called him Grandpa without any integrity. That's more like it. Come here and kowtow 3 times to your other grandpa. Ma Yujia's expression softened as he pointed at Zhuowen and said to Situ Liangji. Situ Liangji didn't dare to resist Ma Yujia. He kowtowed 3 times to Zhuowen and called him Grandpa at the same time. Zhongli Haoyin stood in place and didn't say anything to stop him. Instead, she looked at Ma Yujia with her beautiful eyes. Although this fatty didn't look very reliable, his strength surprised her. Situ Liangji was the strongest genius of the Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower. He was a mid-stage Genesis Lord. However, he was defeated by this fatty in one move. Moreover, this fatty defeated Situ Liangji with his physical strength. This made Zhongli Haoyin even more afraid of this fatty. Not only Zhongli Haoyin, but the others also revealed a surprised expression. They didn't expect this fatty to be so powerful. Chapter 3025. Sorcerer Gods Alter Zhongli Haoyin gazed deeply at Ma Yujia. She had truly underestimated this guy. She hadn't expected him to be so powerful. Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing exchanged a glance. They could see the shock in each other's eyes. Yao Xiangjuan wasn't too surprised. When she had teamed up with Ma Yujia before, they had encountered a creator-level mutated beast. Ma Yujia had helped her escape from that beast, so she knew that Ma Yujia was powerful. He wasn't any weaker than Zhuowen. Jiang Qixing, on the other hand, was truly shocked. He had always thought that this fatty was just a playboy. He hadn't expected him to be a powerful character. As for why this fatty had become Long Wen's friend, he thought it was more likely a coincidence. Now that Ma Yujia had displayed his powerful array Dao skills and terrifying strength, Jiang Qixing finally understood why Ma Yujia had become friends with someone as ruthless as Long Wen. They had become friends because their skills were similar. Of course, the friend that Jiang Qixing thought of was Zhuowen's was in quotation marks. Ma Yujia always claimed to be his best friend, but at the most critical moment, he was the one who had screwed him over the most. Both of you are creation-level God formation masters. The Holy Maiden of the Phoenix people couldn't help but ask when her beautiful eyes landed on Ma Yujia and Zhuowen. Of course, we're not just any Genesis Divine Array Masters. We're much stronger than some trash. Ma Yujia said proudly. Brother Long, the 2 of us broke this array. Let's go in first. Just follow behind me. Ma Yujia said casually. He put his arm around Zhuowen's shoulder and entered the plaza ahead of everyone else. The Holy Maiden of the Phoenix people frowned slightly, but she didn't say anything. She just followed behind silently. Zhongli Haoyin, on the other hand, was calm and composed. She led the human team and followed closely behind. This damn fatty is really arrogant. And that Long One, he killed many of our mutated beasts. How dare these 2 walk in front of us? Holy Maiden, are we just going to let them do as they please? Moses came to the Holy Maiden of the Phoenix people and secretly transmitted his voice to her. The Holy Maiden of the Phoenix people's expression didn't change. She replied indifferently. They won't be able to jump around for long. We're just in case. Let's get close to Gong Gong's body first. Gong Gong was one of the 12 ancestors. His body is earth-shattering, and even after his death, his body can't be broken through with ordinary methods. The humans' understanding of the ancestors' divine array. They know nothing about extracting blood's blood essence. So what if Long One and Ma Yujia enter the altar first? They're also helpless, aren't they? After we enter the altar, the first thing we will do is to extract Gong Gong's spirit blood as soon as possible. Once we do that, it will be time to deal with these human beings. Moses' eyes lit up, and he hurriedly bowed. In the end, he praised the holy maiden for being astute and wise. Everyone came to the front of the altar. Looking at the huge ring-shaped altar high above, everyone felt small and insignificant. "Thank you so much, young sister." Ma Yujia laughed mischievously. He ignored Zhong Li and Hao Yan's pretty face, which had darkened because of this form of address, and ascended the altar with Zhuowen. On the stairs, Zhuowen looked at Ma Yujia with slight bewilderment and sent a voice transmission. "Brother Ma, the order of entering the altar doesn't seem to affect us, right? Why did you raise such an unnecessary request?" Ma Yujia smiled and said, "Brother Long, you may not have seen this kind of altar, but I've seen many of them before. This altar is called the altar of the god of sorcerer. It's used to store powerful creatures. This altar can only be entered 3 times, and only 2 people can enter each time. The interval between each entry is 3 days. If we don't ask to enter the altar first, I'm afraid it won't be easy for us to enter it. Also, don't worry. The altar of the god of sorcerer is something from ancient times. In this era, those who know about it are almost extinct. Be it Zhongli Hao Yan or the Phoenix People's Saintess, they know nothing about the altar of the god of sorcerer." Zhuo Wen's eyes narrowed. He finally understood why Ma Yujia had made such a request. So it was because of this. Of course, Zhuowen was even more afraid of Ma Yujia. This guy even knew about the altar of the god of sorcerer. What kind of background did he have? Zhuowen and Ma Yujia took the lead and entered the top of the altar. At the top of the altar, there were bone flags. These bone flags fluttered in the wind and emitted a decaying aura. "Let's go. Follow me to the center of the altar," Ma Yujia suddenly said and hurriedly entered the center of the altar. At the center, surrounded by the bone flags, there was an exquisite magic array. When the 2 of them entered the magic array, a teleportation force spread out. Zhuowen's vision darkened, and the 2 of them disappeared from the altar. When Zhuowen opened his eyes, he found that he was no longer on the altar. Instead, he was in the air above the altar where Gong Gong's body was stored. After Ma Yujia and Zhuowen were completely teleported away by the magic array, Zhongli Hao Yan and the Phoenix People's Saintess arrived at the top of the altar. They naturally noticed that Zhuowen and Ma Yujia had disappeared from the magic array. This altar really allows us to enter the place where Gong Gong's body is stored. The Phoenix People's Saintess' beautiful eyes lit up. Although she knew that Gong Gong's body was in the air, they had already tried. It was impossible to fly in the plaza. There was an extremely powerful restriction on the air. They were just like mortals. They could only stand below and look at Gong Gong's body. With this magic array, it was naturally the best way to enter the air. Because the magic array could only accommodate 2 people at a time, both sides discussed and agreed that the Phoenix People's Saintess and Zhongli Hao Yan would enter first. However, the moment the 2 of them approached the magic array, they were blocked by a barrier. A sentence appeared above the magic array. Teleport 3 times, 2 people each time, 3 days apart. Everyone was dumbfounded. They naturally understood the meaning of this sentence. In other words, the teleportation array could only teleport 6 people once every 3 days, and only 2 people at a time. Did that fatty know this would happen? Is that why he made such a request at the beginning? The Phoenix People's Saintess' expression was ugly. She began to suspect that the fatty already knew the function of the altar. Otherwise, he would not have made such a useless request. Chapter 30:26. Breakthrough to 6 stars only. Hao Yin nodded and had no objections. She said in a deep voice, "You and I will enter the second time. Brother Yi and Moses will enter the third time. I believe no one has any objections to sending their strongest in. Don't worry, if Brother Yi and I are lucky enough to obtain the ancestral witch's blood essence, we won't take it for ourselves. When we come out, we will distribute the blood essence." Zhong Li and Hao Yan's words were immediately echoed by the others in the team. Some of them were worried that they wouldn't be able to enter the place where Gong Gong's body was kept and would gain nothing. If that happened, wouldn't their efforts be in vain? Zhong Li Hao Yan's words were a warning to them. Everyone expressed their support for Zhong Li Hao Yan's arrangement. The Phoenix People's Saintess sneered at Zhong Li Hao Yan and the others. She thought to herself disdainfully, "They're just mere humans. How dare they dream of obtaining the ancestral witch's blood essence?" The Phoenix People's Saintess was confident that these humans didn't have the correct method to extract the ancestral witch's blood essence. She was taught the correct method by the clan leader of the Phoenix People. She even had the corresponding tools. If she could enter the place where Gong Gong's body was stored, she would definitely gain a lot. As for Zhuowen and Ma Yujie, who entered first, she didn't care about them. So what if they stayed beside Gong Gong's body for 3 more days? If they couldn't grasp the method to extract the ancestral witch's blood essence, it would be useless no matter how long they stayed. "Ha! We finally found Gong Gong's body." Ma Yujie looked at the huge body in front of him and couldn't help but laugh heartily. His eyes were blazing. Zhuowen raised his head and looked at Gong Gong's body. His eyes suddenly focused, and he summoned his clone from the outside world. "What's wrong?" Ma Yujie asked in surprise when he saw Zhuowen summon his clone. "The Gong Gong parasite in my clone is acting strangely. It seems to be yearning for something. I'll send my clone to Gong Gong's body first," Zhuowen said and jumped onto Gong Gong's body. He went to Gong Gong's chest, and the clone sat down cross-legged. At this moment, a thumb-sized bug was wriggling on the forehead of the clone, letting out a soft hiss. The voice seemed to be yearning for something. Zhuowen soon found out what this Gong Gong goo worm craved. It was actually Gong Gong's spirit blood. Jihao's clone's eyes sparkled as he gently pressed his right hand on Gong Gong's chest. Instantly, he found a strong stream of spirit blood surging out of Gong Gong's chest, flowing into his body through his palm. These vital energy and blood continued to circulate in his meridians before finally surging to his Tianling acupoint and being absorbed by the Gong Gong goo worm. Zhuowen's eyes shone brightly. He knew that Gong Gong goo was absorbing the essence blood to strengthen itself. However, during this process, he could absorb part of the essence blood to improve his Panga sacred body. He knew that he had reached the final step of fusing with Gong Gong bugs, but he found that his Panga sacred body showed no sign of breaking through. If the Gong Gong goo worm cooperated with Gong Gong's spirit blood, his Panga sacred body might really break through and become a 6-star Panga sacred body. Thinking of this, Zhuowen hurriedly operated the Pangu's sacred body. Zhuowen seized a part of the essence blood that was absorbed from Gong Gong's body and began to refine his body. Ma Yujie watched quietly. He saw that Zhuowen's clone was emitting a crystal clear light. In the crystal clear light, there was a little blood light flashing. He knew that it was Gong Gong's spirit blood. "Damn it, this guy's taking advantage of me. After this guy breaks through, I must ask him to get me more spirit blood," Ma Yujie complained. At the same time, he looked at Zhuowen with some fear. Since he knew that Zhuowen cultivated the Pangu's sacred body, he knew that this guy's future achievements would not be low. However, he was also worried. He knew more secrets than other cultivators, and he knew how Panga died. Since Zhuowen had inherited Panga's legacy and cultivated the Panga's sacred body, he would definitely be targeted by heaven in the future. Maybe he would follow in Panga's footsteps in the future. Damn it, why should I worry about this guy? I can't even protect myself. I've been trapped in this world for so many years. Instead of worrying about this guy, I'd better worry about myself. Ma Yujie shook his head and said helplessly, time gradually passed, and soon 2 days had passed. During these 2 days, my Yujia saw that Zhuowen's clone's momentum was getting stronger and more terrifying. Even the clone's body became more crystal clear, without any impurities. It looked very clean. At the same time, my Yujia's eyes fell on Gongong's body under his feet. The corners of his mouth kept twitching. Gongong's body now looked a little thin, much thinner than when they first entered this place. Ma Yujia knew that it was because Zhuowen had absorbed too much of Gongong's spirit blood. This guy still hasn't broken through. Gongong's spirit blood is going to be absorbed by this guy, isn't it? Ma Yujia looked anxious, but he didn't dare to disturb Zhuowen's cultivation. After all, Ma Yujia didn't know how to extract the spirit blood of Gong Gong Gong. After all, the body of Gong 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 was way too strong, and the spirit blood of Gong Gong was hidden in the most inconspicuous part of his body. Therefore, Ma Yujia alone couldn't extract the spirit blood of Gong Gong. He knew that if he wanted to get the spirit blood, he still had to rely on Zhuowen. If Zhuowen really absorbed all the spirit blood because of his breakthrough, then all his efforts in entering the dark door would be in vain. Suddenly, a vast and terrifying aura caught Ma Yujia's attention. Zhuowen's clone, who was seated at the very front, suddenly opened his eyes. His body was translucent to the extreme, as if his entire body was transparent. However, the presence he gave off was like that of a huge beast that had just awakened. It was terrifying and frightening. Roar! Zhuowen's clone suddenly raised his head and roared at the sky. His roar throbbed violently like thunder. The wind and clouds swept, and the world shook. A terrifying aura burst out from Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen's eyes shone with excitement. His clone's Panga's sacred body had finally broken through from the peak of the 5-star level to the early stage of the 6-star level. Zhuowen felt that his clone was full of power. This kind of power made him feel like he could control everything. It made Zhuowen feel an indescribable pride in his heart. Phew, fortunately, I have Gongong's spirit blood. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for me to break through to the 6-star level with just Gongong's poisonous insects. Zhuowen murmured to himself. His eyes were filled with joy. At the same time, he lamented the difficulty of advancing his Panga's sacred body. In the past, he could at least advance 1 star with the help of Gongong's poisonous insects. Now that his Panga's sacred body had reached the 5-star level, it was much more difficult to advance. Chapter 3027. Inheritance. Zhuowen knew that it would be more difficult for him to upgrade his Panga's sacred body in the future. Moreover, he had a hunch that he would need more than 1 venomous worm to upgrade his 6-star Pangu sacred body to 7-star. Thinking of this, Zhuowen was a little worried. The Panga's sacred body was indeed a big eater. He could not even fill his stomach. He could imagine that in the next period of time, he would have to constantly search for a large number of resources and ancestral sorcery venomous worms in order to upgrade his Panga's sacred body. Brother Zhuo, I thought you were going to suck all of Gong Gong's blood essence. Ma Yujia quickly came to Zhuowen and said to Zhuowen. He was obviously relieved. Zhuowen looked at Ma Yujia and noticed that Gong Gong's corpse behind him had become thinner. He suddenly thought of something and said awkwardly, I've been cultivating all this time. I didn't notice that I had absorbed so much essence blood. By the way, Brother Ma, how long have I been cultivating? Zhuowen asked in a deep voice. 2 days. There is still 1 day before the next teleportation. It is enough time for us to collect enough blood essence. Ma Yujia said in a deep voice. How much blood essence do you need? Zhuowen asked. It would be best if it was all of Gong Gong's blood essence. Ma Yujia rubbed his hands. Zhuowen looked at the fatty speechlessly. This guy is too greedy, isn't he? I'm just kidding. Just fill this barrel for me. Ma Yujia also saw the strange look in Zhuowen's eyes. He was a little embarrassed. He took out a barrel that was half the height of a man from his spirit ring and put it in front of Zhuowen. Zhuowen took the barrel and jumped on Gong Gong's chest. He reached out his right hand, and a light blue venomous worm appeared in his palm. It was Gong Gong's venomous worm. The venomous worm drilled into Gong Gong's chest and made a small hole. Zhuowen used his spirit sense to reach deep into Gong Gong's chest and soon found the space where the blood essence was hidden. With a sweep of his divine sense, he swept up all the essence blood in the space and poured it into the wooden bucket. Soon, the wooden bucket was filled with Gong Gong's spirit blood, which was full of energy. Take it. Zhuowen handed the wooden bucket to Ma Yujia, who excitedly took the wooden bucket and put it into his spirit ring. The Gong Gong goo worm crawled out again and stood on Zhuowen's palm, hissing as if it was very unhappy. Are you complaining for Gong Gong? Zhuowen gave a bitter smile. After all, Gong Gong was one of the 12 ancestors of Magi and used to be one of the most powerful beings in this starry sky. Later on, he died, and his corpse was immortal. Now that he had been found, his blood essence was actually going to be divided among others. How tragic was this? Hiss, hiss, hiss. The Gong Gong goo bug suddenly moved to the spot between Gong Gong's eyebrows and hissed, seeming to want Zhuowen to go over. Zhuowen had no choice but to follow. Looking at the goo bug's movements, it seemed to want him to put his palm between Gong Gong's eyebrows. Zhuowen hesitated for a while, but still put his right hand between Gong Gong's eyebrows. Suddenly, there was a boom in his mind like a thunderbolt rumbling. Immediately, an ancient image appeared in the depths of his mind. This image showed the 12 ancestors of Magi and the 3 pure ones fighting against chaos. Zhuowen had seen this image in the memories of other ancestors of Magi before. He knew that the 12 ancestors of Magi and the 3 pure ones fell because of the invasion of chaos. He also knew that the invasion of chaos was only temporary. Once it stirred up trouble again, it would be a great disaster in this starry sky. The image quickly changed to Gong Gong, who was severely injured and drifting in the starry sky. Finally, he entered the depths of the dark portal and sealed his venomous worm before he died, and set up the altar of the Magi god to store his body. Human, I feel Pangu's aura on you. You have received Pangu's inheritance? Suddenly, a deep voice sounded in Zhuowen's ears. Zhuowen looked around blankly, only to find that after the image disappeared, the space he was in was pitch black. The voice seemed to come from the depths of the darkness, making him unable to identify the specific direction. You are Ancestor Magi Gong Gong? You're not dead? Zhuowen frowned slightly and could not help but ask. I'm already dead. This is only a trace of my soul. If I didn't feel the aura of my venomous worm and Pangu's aura on you, I would have killed you when you absorbed my essence blood. Gong Gong's voice was faint, with a terrifying majesty that Zhuowen could not imagine. Cold sweat trickled down Zhuowen's forehead. This was an Ancestor Magi-level powerhouse, a powerhouse who stood at the peak of the starry sky. Even if he was dead, if he attacked him with just a trace of his divine consciousness, he would probably lose a layer of skin even if he did not die. It seemed that these real almighty powerhouses were not to be trifled with, even if they were dead. Human, you haven't answered my first question. Gong Gong's voice sounded a little impatient. You're right. I have indeed received Pangu's inheritance and cultivated Pangu's sacred body, Zhuowen said in a deep voice. Gong Gong suddenly fell silent. After a while, he spoke again and said, No wonder you can integrate with my venomous worm. You have cultivated Pangu's sacred body. Your Pangu's sacred body has just been promoted to 6 stars, right? Gong Gong asked in a deep voice. Yes, it's all thanks to your venomous worm. Zhuowen smiled awkwardly. You have inherited Pangu's inheritance, so you should know your mission. In the future, you must fight against the approaching chaos for this starry sky. Even if you die, you must resist the invasion of the chaos. Do you understand? Gong Gong said faintly. Zhuowen could only nod, but he did not take it seriously. The chaos was too far away from him, and Zhuowen had never seen what the chaos was like. Therefore, he did not agree with this mission. Originally, I left my venomous worm and body to look for an inheritor. Since you are Pangu's inheritance, it is the same for me to pass on my power to you. Next, you must follow my instructions. I will pass on all my life's energy to you, so that your Pangu's sacred body could be further improved. As soon as Gong Gong finished speaking, Zhuowen suddenly opened his eyes. His right hand was still in the position between Gong Gong's eyebrows. Zhuowen's eyes were very serious. He took a deep look at Gong Gong, and Gong Gong's vicissitude voice sounded in his mind. Sit on my Tianling acupoint, and I will pass on my energy to you. If you can't bear it, tell me in advance, and I will stop passing on my energy. Zhuowen nodded, then went to Gong Gong's Tianling acupoint and sat down cross-legged. Immediately, Gong Gong's huge body began to emit a sparkling light. Chapter 30:28. The disappearing corpse at this moment. Ma Yujia's eyes were full of satisfaction after obtaining a bucket of ancestral witch's blood essence. He began to search around the ancestral witch's corpse to see if there were any other treasures. But soon, he found that there was something wrong with the ancestral witch's corpse. It was because the ancestral witch's corpse began to emit white light, which formed into light spots that floated up. Ma Yujia followed the direction of the light spots and saw Zhuowen sitting on Gong Gong's Tianling acupoint at a glance. These light spots all gathered in Zhuowen's body. This guy, he's going to eat it all. Ma Yujia held his forehead. There was a trace of speechlessness in his eyes, but it was more serious. In fact, when he was close to the ancestral witch Gong Gong, he had a bad feeling that if he tried to extract the ancestral witch's blood essence himself, he would definitely end up badly. Ma Yujia believed in his hunch, so he wisely didn't do it before. Instead, he let Zhuowen do it. After all, the latter had fused with Gong Gong's poisonous insects and cultivated the Panga's sacred body. He was more qualified to extract the ancestral witch's blood essence than Ma Yujia. Ma Yujia suspected that Gong Gong might still have a trace of his remnant soul. Once someone touched his corpse, they would probably suffer a strong backlash. Zhuowen might have communicated with Gong Gong's remnant soul and gained its approval. Now, Gong Gong wanted to pass his inheritance directly to Zhuowen. Thinking of this, Ma Yujia couldn't help but shake his head and smile bitterly. I think the biggest winner this time should be this guy. Not only did he get Gong Gong's poisonous insects, but he also got Gong Gong's inheritance. Fortunately, I already got a bucket of blood essence otherwise. Thinking of the Phoenix people's Sanus, Zhongli, and Hao Yin who hadn't come up yet, Ma Yujia knew that they probably wouldn't be able to get any benefits. Time gradually passed. After 20 hours, ancestral witch Gong Gong's huge corpse turned into light spots and gathered in Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were shining with an unblinking light. He kept operating the Pangu, sacred body, and absorbing the energy that ancestral, which Gong Gong had passed on to him. He could clearly feel that the level of his Panga's sacred body was increasing as he absorbed the energy. When the inheritance of Gong Gong ended, Jihao merged the last stream of energy into his body. His body was scorching hot like never before. Creak, creak. The doppelganger slowly stood up, and its body actually burst out with continuous explosive sounds. An aura even fiercer than before emerged from the doppelganger's body. Gong Gong's legacy directly upgraded my Pangu's sacred body from the early 6-star level to the late 6-star level. Zhuowen's eyes were as dazzling as the stars. He jumped up in excitement and couldn't help but laugh heartily. The clone leaped to the main body side and entered the main body with a single step, merging with the main body. Zhuowen was bursting with confidence. With his current strength, even the top geniuses like the Phoenix People Saintus and Zhongli Hao Yin were no match for him. Brother Zhuo, you've inherited the legacy of ancestor Magus Gong Gong. Ma Yujia approached Zhuowen and asked cautiously, looking at him. Yes, Gong Gong left a trace of his soul in his mind. Later, he communicated with me and passed the legacy to me. Zhuowen said with a smile. You're really lucky, Ma Yujia muttered, lamenting the unfairness of the world. But soon he calmed down and said in a deep voice, You've taken the entire legacy of Gong Gong. I think Zhongli Hao Yin and the Phoenix People's Saintus won't let you go. They came here for the essence blood of the ancestor Magus, but you... Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and grinned. I've inherited the legacy of Gong Gong, and I still have a part of the essence blood of the ancestor Magus. But I only give it to people who are pleasing to the eye. As for the alien race, hee. Gong Gong's essence blood was hidden in a mysterious space inside Gong Gong's body. After Zhuowen had inherited the legacy of Gong Gong, the essence blood in that mysterious space was also stored in the big world by Zhuowen. To be honest, Zhuowen had absorbed too much essence blood before. In fact, he had absorbed most of Gong Gong's essence blood, so there was not much left. Ma Yujie rubbed his hands and said shamelessly, "Brother, you still have essence blood in you. Well, give me some more." Zhuowen was speechless as he looked at the thick-skinned Ma Yujie. Ma Yujie felt a little helpless. He could now feel that since this guy's Panga's sacred body had been upgraded, his strength had become much more terrifying than before. In the past, he might have been able to suppress this guy, but now he might be suppressed. When he thought of this, a sense of danger rose in Ma Yujie's heart. He needed to raise his cultivation a little more. Otherwise, Zhuowen would quickly overtake him. It seems that the barrier of the altar is disappearing. Zhuowen found that the barrier between the void space and the altar below was disappearing. At this moment, the power that restricted the airspace above them was also being weakened. The altar of the sorcerer god and the power around it were originally powered by Gong Gong's corpse. Now that Gong Gong's corpse has disappeared and you have inherited his legacy, I'm afraid that everything will disappear this time. Ma Yujie lowered his head and analyzed, then continued. Brother Zhuo, I think you'd better run away later. No matter if it's the human race or the alien race. After discovering that Gong Gong's corpse has disappeared, I'm afraid that the first thing they will suspect is us. Run away? I don't plan to run away yet. I have something to do with the saintess of the Phoenix people. Zhuowen shook his head. Ma Yujie shrugged and said, It's up to you if you don't want to run away. I'll definitely run away. Seeing that the void space had completely dissipated, Ma Yujie said goodbye to Zhuowen and disappeared on the spot. Zhuowen looked at Ma Yujie, who disappeared without a trace, with a trace of caution in his eyes. Ma Yujie was not only terrifyingly powerful, but he was also very good at escaping. Even he had not been able to capture his escape route and traces. Meanwhile, Zhuowen leisurely landed on the white plaza below. Zhongli Haoyan and the saintess of the Phoenix people, who were about to enter the array of the altar and teleport into the void space above, stared blankly at Zhuowen, who was descending from above. Not only were the two women stunned, but the human and alien race teams were also stunned. What was going on? Wasn't there supposed to be a terrifying restrictive power in the square? Cultivators couldn't fly up, let alone come down from above. They could only teleport through the array. But what was going on now? They also realized that the fat man, who had always been by Zhuowen's side, had disappeared. Although they could see Gong Gong's huge body in the void space from the square, they could only vaguely see it. Chapter 3029. Moses' provocation. Although the huge body of ancestral shaman Gong Gong seemed to have disappeared, which surprised everyone, they didn't pay too much attention to it. They thought that some kind of formation had appeared in the space and concealed the scene inside. Now that the restrictive force in the sky had disappeared, the void space was completely revealed to everyone. Gong Gong's body was gone, and so was the fat man, leaving only the scarred youth in front of them. Long One, where's ancestral shaman Gong Gong's body? The Phoenix people's saintess suddenly berated. She had a bad premonition. Zhuowen didn't pay attention to the Phoenix people's saintess. Instead, he waved his hand, took out 7 jade bottles, and distributed them to the 7 people in the human team. Jiang Qixing put away the jade bottles and asked doubtfully, Brother Long, what is this? Zhongli Haoyan, Yi Qidong, and the others also held the jade bottles, looking confused. This is ancestral shaman Gong Gong's blood essence. Zhuowen said indifferently. What? It's ancestral shaman's blood essence. Zhongli Haoyan's beautiful eyes widened, and she hurriedly opened the bottle cork. She immediately smelled blood. Of course, along with the smell of blood was a rich energy that shocked her. This energy was so surging that she hurriedly closed the bottle cork. She was certain that this jade bottle contained ancestral shaman Gongong's blood essence. Although her purpose in entering the door of darkness was to obtain the ancestral shaman's blood essence, she also knew that they didn't know how to extract it. They would be satisfied with just a few drops. But now, they had directly obtained a bottle of ancestral shaman's blood essence. This harvest greatly exceeded their expectations. Brother Long, thank you for your generosity. Zhong Haoyan put away the jade bottles and solemnly bowed deeply to Zhuowen. She knew very well that even if she personally went to ancestral shaman Gongong's body, she, who didn't know how to extract it, couldn't obtain so much ancestral shaman's blood essence. Yi Qidong, Jiang Qisheng, Yao Xiangjuan, and the others all thanked Zhuowen from the bottom of their hearts. It had to be said that Zhuowen's generosity had helped them a lot. Even Situ Liangji, who had kowtowed to Zhuowen and called him Grandpa, sincerely bowed and thanked Zhuowen. Compared to the preciousness of the ancestral shaman's blood essence, kowtowing and calling him grandfather was simply a small matter that wasn't worth mentioning. If Zhuowen asked him to kowtow and call him grandpa now, he would definitely do it without hesitation. When the saintess of the Phoenix people saw that Zhuowen was actually distributing the ancestral witch's blood essence, her beautiful eyes narrowed. She immediately became furious and said, "You actually have the ancestral witch's blood essence? Did you cause Gongong's corpse to disappear? Did you take Gongong's body away?" As soon as the Phoenix people's saintess said this, the eyes of the foreign races turned hostile. Even the eyes of the human race flickered. No one knew what they were thinking. Compared to a bottle of ancestral witch's blood essence, the entire ancestral witch's body was obviously more precious. If Gongong's body was really taken away by this person, it would definitely be a big deal. If news of this spread out, this person would probably attract the attention of many powerful beings. Zhuowen's eyes were gloomy as he said coldly, "The ancestral witch's body is rarely seen in the secular world. I think that in this part of the universe, there are basically no spatial artifacts that can contain the ancestral witch's body." Saintess, your words are unreasonable. Huh, unreasonable? Then tell me, where did Gongong's body go? Other than being taken away by you, is there any other possibility? The Phoenix people's saintess sneered. I received the ancestral, which Gongong's inheritance, and I did indeed obtain a part of the ancestral witch's blood essence. I gave away a part of it, and now I only have this last bottle of ancestral witch's blood essence. As for Gongong's body, after the ancestral witch's inheritance, it collapsed and turned into countless specks of light. Zhuowen looked calm. With a flick of his finger, he took out another jade bottle and waved it in front of the Phoenix people's saintess. Zhuowen said this because he did not want others to think that the ancestral witch's body was taken away by him. Compared to the ancestral witch's body, the ancestral witch's inheritance required luck, and it was not suitable for everyone. Therefore, he said that the ancestral witch's inheritance was more suitable than directly obtaining the ancestral witch's body. After all, the ancestral witch's body contained the ancestral witch's blood essence, which was something that almost all human and alien races desired. If he really did obtain it, he would be attacked by all. However, not everyone was interested in the ancestral witch's inheritance. At least, the human race was not interested in it. After all, the ancestral witch's inheritance was very different from the human race's cultivation method. Zhuowen cultivated the Pangu sacred body, and he did not directly inherit the ancestral witch's cultivation method. Instead, he inherited the last bit of energy from the ancestral witch's body. Of course, although the method of inheriting the ancestral witch's inheritance was safer than taking away the ancestral witch's body, it was still very dangerous. If the news spread, there would probably still be many people from the human race and alien race who would hunt him down. Zhuowen had already thought about this when he received the ancestral witch's inheritance, so he was already mentally prepared. The only thing that comforted him was that his Panga's sacred body had finally made a breakthrough and reached the late 6-star level. He finally had the power to protect himself. Now, just by relying on the power of his avatar, he could fight against the Creation Lord. He could even defeat the slightly weaker Creation Lord. As for Senkiin, who was a supreme expert at the early stage of the sky-reaching realm, Zhuan might not be a match for him at all. However, if such an expert wanted to squash him like an ant, it was not very likely. In front of such an expert, Zhuan still had the power to protect himself to a certain extent with the various trump cards he had. You've obtained the ancestral witch's inheritance? That's impossible. You're just a human. How could you have obtained the ancestral witch's approval? The saintess of the Phoenix people shook her head, then spread her hands at Zhuan and said, "Give this jade bottle to me. Then, hand over the ancestral witch's inheritance, and I won't do anything to you. I'll let you live." Zhuan chuckled and said, "Do you think I'm an idiot? You want me to hand over the ancestral witch's inheritance? You're dreaming. So you don't want to hand it over?" The saintess of the Phoenix people's pretty face was cold, and her beautiful eyes became very unfriendly. A wave of killing intent burst forth from her. Moses took a big step forward and shouted coldly, "Little bastard, do you know who our saintess is? It's your honor to ask you to hand over the ancestral witch's inheritance and blood essence. Why are you still chattering over there? If you know what's good for you, hand it over quickly. Don't force us to make a move." "Oh, if I don't hand it over, you're going to make a move?" Zhuan's eyes flashed with a sharp light, and he looked coldly at Moses. Moses had been harboring evil intentions towards him ever since he entered the door of darkness. Zhuan had long since found this alien an eyesore. Previously, he had been busy breaking the formation. Moses was quite strong, and it would take some effort to kill him. Moreover, he might have to expose his trump card, the Holy Divine Bow. Thus, Zhuan had not made a move until now. Chapter 30:30. Tyrannical Moses was furious. He was getting more and more annoyed with the scarred youth. Before entering the door of darkness, he had already killed quite a number of people from the Merfolk tribe. Furthermore, he had even killed the genius of the Merfolk tribe, Sauron. Even Elder MDEA had suffered at the hands of this fellow. Now this kid was even more unrepentant, contradicting him like this. To be more precise, this kid seemed to be looking down on him, not putting him in his eyes at all. This kind of contempt made Moses very unhappy. This guy was just a mere human, and his cultivation was only at the eternal overlord level. What right did he have to look down on him? I'll make my move today. You don't respect the saintess, which means you're looking down on us foreign races. Today, I'll teach you a lesson. Moses snorted coldly. With a stomp of his right foot, he shot out like a cannonball, rapidly rushing towards Zhuan. The Phoenix people's saintess watched this scene silently, not stopping it. She also didn't put Zhuan in her eyes, but she was very dissatisfied with Zhuan's attitude. Moses' move came at the right time. She was very clear about Moses' strength. Among this group of people, Moses should be second only to her and Zhongli Haoyan. He was even stronger than Yi Qigong. He was very powerful. Zhongli Haoyan's beautiful eyes turned cold when she saw Moses attack again. Just as she was about to attack, a blazing aura came crashing toward her. Zhongli Haoyan raised her head slightly and immediately discovered the source of the aura was the Phoenix people's saintess. At this moment, the Phoenix people's saintess was staring coldly at her. Zhongli Haoyan knew very well that if she dared to help Zhuan, the Phoenix people's saintess would immediately attack her. Although Zhongli Haoyan was very confident in her own strength, she knew that the Phoenix people's saintess was even more terrifying. If she were to face the Phoenix people's saintess head-on, she might not be able to gain much of an advantage. She might even be at a disadvantage. Thinking of this, Zhongli Haoyan didn't act rashly. She just looked at Zhuan's back and sighed, feeling a little guilty. After all, Zhuan had just given her a bottle of ancestral witch's blood essence, but she was unable to help when Moses attacked. Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan's expressions changed greatly as they secretly cursed Moses for being shameless. However, Moses's movements were simply too fast. In addition, the disparity in strength between them and Moses was too great. Even if they went over, they would only be cannon fodder. On the other hand, Yi Qidong and Situ Yangji merely stood where they were with flickering eyes. They had no intention of attacking at all. Zhuowen silently watched all of this and sneered in his heart. In the human clan team, apart from Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan, only Zhongli Haoyan was a little more upright. The others were just joking around. Huh, you dare to be absent-minded in front of a great enemy? You really don't know how the word death is written? At this moment, Moses had already rushed in front of Zhuowen. He could see at a glance that Zhuowen was actually absent-minded. He was annoyed and angry in his heart. He suddenly punched out, and endless astral winds swept out. Moses wanted to directly smash this hateful and arrogant human's cheek with a punch, then cripple his limbs, and finally slowly torture him to death. What a terrifying fist wind. This Moses is going all out. I'm afraid Brother Long is in danger. Zhongli Haoyan also felt Moses's terrifying fist wind. Her pretty face slightly froze, and there was some worry in her beautiful eyes. Zhuowen stood in place with a calm expression. There was no change in his expression. As Moses's fist got closer and closer, he slowly stretched out his right hand. The movement of his right hand was very slow, but it accurately caught Moses's right fist. Bang! The moment Moses's fist hit Zhuowen's right palm, a muffled sound like thunder exploded. Then, Moses was shocked to find that the human in front of him didn't even sway. He was as still as a mountain, standing in front of him. As for the scene that he imagined of this person's cheek being smashed by him, it didn't happen. At the same time, Moses saw the face of the young man in front of him again. There was a faintly discernible mocking expression on his face. Moses was furious. This guy actually dared to mock him. Die for me. Flood dragon explosion. Moses's empty left fist suddenly hooked up and smashed out fiercely. Suddenly, the space between the two of them collapsed. From the collapsed spatial rift, countless tides surged out, manifesting one after another terrifying and ferocious flood dragon after another. These flood dragons instantly surrounded Zhuowen, and then began to tighten around Zhuowen, wanting to completely strangle him. The tide receded, and the flood dragons gradually disappeared, but Moses's face was full of horror. This was because he found that the palm that was holding his right fist didn't loosen. Instead, it tightened fiercely. The strength was so great that he couldn't help but groan in pain. Moses, that's all you've got. The tide collapsed, and Zhuowen still stood in the same place like a mountain. The mocking expression on his face became more intense, and the fear in Moses's eyes became more profound. How is this possible? You're not hurt at all? Moses said in a trembling voice. He suddenly realized that he was so small in front of this human in front of him. It was as if this human in front of him could take his life at will with just a thought. This feeling intensified the fear in his heart, and he couldn't help but cry out in fear. Previously, you've been clamoring in front of me, calling me a little bastard, an ant, as if I'm not worth mentioning at all in front of you. You can easily crush me if you want to. Crack! As Zhuowen spoke, his right hand suddenly clenched and directly crushed Moses's right fist. Moses screamed in horror, and his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. I saw that you've been clamoring for so long, and I really thought that you were so powerful that you could easily crush me to death. Now it seems you're just a dog that knows how to bark. As for your strength, it really disappoints me. As Zhuowen spoke indifferently, his right hand suddenly twisted, and Moses's right hand was directly torn off by him. You said that I didn't respect the saint and wanted to teach me a lesson. Then what about that lesson? Rip! Zhuowen also tore off Moses's left arm, leaving behind Moses's shrill screams. You said that I was distracted in front of a great enemy and didn't know how to write the word death. Well, let me tell you now, I really do know how to write the word death. Zhuowen held Moses' legs with both hands and tore them off, and a mist of blood gushed out. Moses fell to the ground, and blood flowed all over the ground. Zhuowen slowly squatted down in front of Moses and used the blood on the ground to write the word death in front of Moses. Did you see the word death clearly? After Zhuowen finished writing the word death, he grabbed Moses' head and said indifferently. Moses felt fear. The fear of death was so close to him, and he was terrified. I beg you to spare my life. Moses' voice was filled with regret. Zhuowen didn't say anything. Instead, his right hand formed a finger and pressed it on Moses' forehead. A terrifying and violent force surged into Moses' divine soul, completely dissipating it. Moses stared at Zhuowen and finally fell on the word death and completely lost his breath. Chapter 30:31. Confrontation. The entire place was silent. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Moses, who was lying in a pool of blood. It was as if they had all become mutes. None of them spoke a word. In the air, one could even hear the slightly uneasy breathing of the crowd. Compared to the humans, the foreign races were even more silent. Their gazes were fixed on the dead Moses for a long time before finally shifting to Zhuowen. The beautiful eyes of the Phoenix people's saintess fell on Zhuowen. The shock in her eyes had been replaced by anger and killing intent. Faced with the gazes of the foreign races, Zhuowen was calm and composed. He slowly stood up and looked at the Phoenix people's saintess fearlessly. Zhuowen took out the jade bottle again and shook it in front of the Phoenix people's saintess. He said calmly, "Saintess, I have a few questions for you. If you answer me truthfully, the ancestral witch's blood essence in this jade bottle is yours. Also, I won't attack the foreign races anymore." "Oh, you intend to implicate us in the grudge between you and Moses? You want to deal with us?" The beautiful eyes of the Phoenix people's saintess slowly narrowed. Illusory flames appeared all over her body. The strange thing was that although these flames were illusory, they had the burning pain of real flames. Waves of heat swept out one after another, causing the surrounding temperature to rise rapidly. The surrounding people also felt the sudden rise in temperature. Their expressions changed slightly as they looked at the Phoenix people's saintess with fear. Just the burning aura that erupted was already so powerful. They had no doubt that if the Phoenix people's saintess were to attack with all her might, there were probably not many people here who could stop her. The dozen foreign races following behind the saintess did not look away. They roared and released a powerful aura as they stared coldly at Zhuowen. "Saintess, have you forgotten about us?" Suddenly, a clear voice rang out. Zhongli Haoyin took a step forward and came to Zhuowen's side. A powerful aura that was not weaker than that of the Phoenix people's saintess burst out from Zhongli Haoyin's body. It was like the endless waves of the ocean, surging up wave after wave, blocking the scorching aura released by the Phoenix people's saintess. Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing stood on Zhuowen's side without hesitation. On the other hand, the eyes of Yi Qidong, Situ Liangji, and the others flickered. They hesitated for a moment before walking up. However, from their expressions, it could be seen that they weren't particularly willing to stand up for Zhuowen. Perhaps it was also because of Hao Yan's face. Although the strength Zhuowen had just displayed was terrifying, and he had even given each of them a bottle of ancestral witch's blood essence, it was still not enough. After all, Zhuowen was just a loose cultivator without any background. Although they had received the favor of this loose cultivator, it was impossible for them to break off their relationship with a noble existence like the Phoenix people's saintess for a mere loose cultivator. The saintess of the Phoenix people's pretty face changed slightly. She coldly looked at Zhongli Haoyin and said, "Zhongli Haoyin, are you really going to stand up for this loose cultivator? You should know that if you stand up now, you will offend the Mare people and Phoenix people, 2 of the top 10 races of the primitive heaven domain. Even if you don't think for yourself, I think you should think for the heavenly temple behind you. I think your heavenly temple will definitely not offend both the Phoenix people and the Mare people for a loose cultivator. Zhongli Haoyan's beautiful eyes darkened. She coldly said, "If I act now, I represent myself, Zhongli Haoyan, and not the heavenly temple behind me. Brother Longwen has helped me, so I have to repay him. This is a matter of heaven and earth. Saintess, you don't need to use the matter between forces to pressure me." The Phoenix people's Saintess did not get angry. Her beautiful eyes moved and fell on Yi Qidong, Sito Liangji, and the others. She said, "Do you have the same thoughts as Zhongli Haoyan?" Yi Qidong and Sito Liangji immediately showed hesitation. Their eyes flashed, and then they took a few steps back. They cupped their hands at Zhongli Haoyan from afar, intending to stand by and watch. Yao Xiangjuan saw that Yi Qidong and Sito Liangji did not intend to participate and could not help but become anxious. Zhuowen waved his hand and stopped Yao Xiangjuan. He had not given out the ancestral witch's blood essence to win over Yi Qidong and Sito Liangji, but he did not want to have a conflict with the human race in front of this alien race. Taking out a bottle of ancestral witch's blood essence was clearly the best way. Anyway, he had a lot of ancestral witch's blood essence. This was just a drop in the ocean for him. Moreover, he did not intend to ask for help from others when he faced the Phoenix People's Saintess. Of course, Zhongli Haoyan stood up for him, which made him look at her in a new light. Dealing with some cats and dogs? I don't need too much help. Zhuowen shook his head at Yao Xiangjuan. Although Yao Xiangjuan was still angry, since the person involved, Zhuowen, had said so, she could only let it go. Cats and dogs? Longwen, aren't you a little too arrogant? You defeated Moses by luck, and you don't put us alien races in your eyes? The Phoenix People's Saintess was so angry that she laughed, but her beautiful eyes were even colder. Saintess, why are you talking nonsense with this guy who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth? Let's attack together and take down this human. When the time comes, we will deprive him of his 5 senses and let him fall into the Avicii hell and suffer for eternity. A member of the alien race with a human face and a tiger body strode forward. He held a bronze halberd in his hand and looked coldly at Zhuowen as he spoke hatefully. Zhuowen shook his head and looked at the Phoenix People's Saintess indifferently. He sneered and said, "I'm not so petty as to deal with you alien races because of Moses. It's because you alien races have gone too far." At this point, Zhuowen's eyes were very cold. That coldness penetrated deep into one's heart. "I remember that you said that you were in an alliance with us humans, so you should work together and help each other. But why do I see that you alien races have joined forces and are constantly hunting down us humans? Because of this, most of us humans have died at the hands of you alien races." Zhuowen looked coldly at the Phoenix People's Saintess in front of him. His voice was very low and cold. "What? You alien races have joined forces to kill us humans in the Door of Darkness?" Zhongli Haoyan's pretty face changed slightly. Her beautiful eyes stared fixedly at the Phoenix People's Saintess, and her voice was as cold as ice as she questioned. "Miss Zhongli, you don't know? Someone should have informed you of this through a communication jade talisman, right?" Zhuowen frowned. He looked at Zhongli Haoyan, who seemed to be completely unaware of this, and felt very confused. In his opinion, Zhongli Haoyan and the others should have known that the alien races had joined forces to kill the humans in the Door of Darkness. Of course, Zhongli Haoyan and the others knew about this, but they didn't come back to lead the humans against the alien races. This actually made Zhuowen a little unhappy. Chapter 30-32. Zhongli Haoyan takes action. Zhongli Haoyan smiled bitterly. "Brother Long, you don't know, but I'm the only disciple of Heavenly Temple who entered the Door of Darkness. Here, apart from Brother Yi and a few others, I'm not familiar with anyone else." Hearing this, Zhuowen suddenly realized that Zhongli Haoyan didn't seem to be lying, and during this period of contact, he found that Zhongli Haoyan's character was quite good. She shouldn't leave the human race in the lurch. Zhuowen glanced sideways at Yi Qidong, Sito Liangji, and the others who were watching from the sidelines, and his eyes revealed a meaningful look. Yi Qidong, Situ Liangji, and the others naturally noticed Zhuowen's gaze. Their eyes flickered, and they avoided looking at him. Zhuowen withdrew his gaze, no longer paying attention to Yi Qidong and Situ Liangji. He already had a conclusion in his heart. Obviously, it was pardonable that Zhongli Haoyin didn't know about this, but Yi Qidong and Situ Liangji definitely knew. However, the two of them clearly prioritized finding ancestral Shaman Gongong's corpse, and they didn't even tell Zhongli Haoyin about this. They understood Zhongli Haoyin's character. After learning this news, she would definitely give up on finding ancestral Shaman Gongong's corpse and go to deal with the human race's predicament first. The two of them wanted to find ancestral shaman's corpse as soon as possible, so they naturally didn't want to waste time because of this matter. So they kept it a secret and didn't let Zhongli Haoyin know. Zhongli Haoyin also seemed to realize something. She glanced at Yi Qidong and Situ Liangji with a trace of anger in her beautiful eyes. Brother Long, what happened to the other humans in the Door of Darkness? Zhongli Haoyin asked with some shame. She was really ashamed. After all, she was the first on the Starry Sky contribution list, the #1 prodigy of the human race. She had a very high prestige among the young talents of the human race. Now, many of her fellow humans were in trouble, but she actually didn't know about it, and even came here to find ancestral Shaman Gongong's corpse. She felt very guilty. Senior Sister Zhongli, don't worry. The Foreign Race Alliance was basically wiped out by Brother Long. The leaders of 3 teams, Hu Bin, Sha Ru, and Lung Bai all died at Brother Long's hands. Yao Shangjuan said with a smile. You took care of the Foreign Race Alliance? Zhongli Haoyin was slightly startled. Then she bowed to Zhuowen and said gratefully, Brother Long, thank you for your help. On behalf of my fellow humans, I sincerely thank you. As she spoke, Zhongli Haoyin passed the ancestral shaman blood essence in her hand to Zhuowen and said, I'm ashamed to accept this blood essence. Brother Long, take it back and use it yourself. You assist. S's SIs after all, I out. Has know that the human race t. You, heavens a tess. Why does Qidong's assess, and there's their Yain Yu Yayong and the others. However, Yi Qidong and the others could not say anything. After all, if they were to talk about this matter, they were indeed in the wrong. On the other hand, the expressions of the foreign races changed drastically. The Phoenix people's holy maiden's expression darkened. Whether it was Hu Bin, Sha Ru, or Lung Bai, they were all famous geniuses in the primitive celestial realm. Although they couldn't compare to the Phoenix people's holy maiden and Moses, they were all geniuses with high status in their respective races. Furthermore, the 3 of them were extremely powerful. If they joined forces, even a pinnacle creator would have to face them head-on. However, the 3 of them had all been killed by Long One. Not only that, but the 3 powerful foreign race teams, led by Hu Bin and the other 2, had also been annihilated. This was too unbelievable. However, when she thought about how Zhuowen had easily killed Moses, the Phoenix people's holy maiden felt that it made sense. The human in front of him was only an eternal overlord, but his strength was so terrifying that it struck fear in his heart. However, the Phoenix people's holy maiden wasn't afraid. Although the human in front of her was very strong, she was very confident in herself. She had the 99 Phoenix body, and her cultivation had reached the half-step creator level. Her innate abilities were also inherited from birth. Her strength was definitely one of the best among the younger generation in the primitive celestial realm. Moses' strength wasn't bad, but compared to the Phoenix people's holy maiden, the difference was too great. If the Phoenix people's holy maiden had fought with her full strength, Moses wouldn't have been able to withstand a single blow. Long One, you've got guts. You actually dared to kill Hu Bin, Sha Ru, and Lung Bai. You even destroyed their 3 teams. Do you know that the 3 of them have extraordinary origins? Are they geniuses from the 10 major races of the primitive celestial realm? The Phoenix people's holy maiden slowly stepped forward. An even more terrifying and blazing aura surged from her body. The foreign races closest to her panicked and began to retreat, distancing themselves from her. Zhongli Haoyan's aura was instantly shattered by the Phoenix people's holy maiden's blazing aura. Zhongli Haoyan grunted and couldn't help but retreat a few steps. Her beautiful eyes stared at the Phoenix people's holy maiden in disbelief. I didn't expect you to have been hiding your strength all this time. This is your true strength. Zhongli Haoyan's beautiful eyes darkened. The moment her aura was completely shattered, she knew that she wasn't a match for this prodigy in front of her. Unfortunately, she had always thought that her strength should be about the same as the Phoenix people's holy maiden. Only now did she realize that there was a huge difference between the two of them. Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan couldn't help but retreat because they couldn't withstand this terrifying and blazing aura. Their eyes were filled with fear. Yi Qidong and Situ Liangji, who were standing quite a distance away and watching with folded arms, were in a much better situation. After all, they weren't directly hit by the blazing aura. At the same time, they looked at Zhuowen's back with a trace of mockery and resentment. Just now, Zhuowen had exposed them in front of everyone, causing them to hold a grudge against him. Now, they were hoping that this guy would die in the hands of the Phoenix people's holy maiden. Of course, in their opinion, the best outcome would be for both sides to be seriously injured. However, this idea of both sides being seriously injured was completely extinguished when the Phoenix people's holy maiden went all out. Their eyes were filled with fear. This Phoenix people's holy maiden was too terrifying. Even they didn't have the slightest intention to resist such a terrifying aura. They knew that Long One was definitely going to die. There wouldn't be any luck left. Long One, run. I'll help you block her for a while. Zhongli Haoyan's beautiful eyes were filled with determination. She already knew that there was a huge gap between her and the Phoenix people's holy maiden. However, she wasn't an ungrateful person. Chapter 3033. Flying Swallow /Wind stood there calmly. Although the aura of the saintess of the Phoenix people was terrifying, Zhuowen was not too afraid. Just as Zhuowen was about to unleash his Pangu, sacred body, Zhongli Haoyan dashed toward the saintess of the Phoenix people like a light swallow. And the words Zhongli Haoyan said before she left, "I'll help you block for a while," were deeply engraved in Zhuowen's heart. Zhuowen wanted to pull Zhongli Haoyan back, but it was too late. Zhongli Haoyan had already arrived in front of the saintess of the Phoenix people. Zhongli Haoyan was using a blue divine sword. The surface of the divine sword was engraved with dense blood-red patterns, and its aura was very strong. Zhuowen had estimated that the divine sword should be a creation-level divine weapon, and its level was not low. Flying Swallow /. Zhongli Haoyan's gaze was like a knife. At that moment, she seemed to have ignored the terrifying aura of the saintess of the Phoenix people. All she could see was the light blue divine sword in her hand. The saintess of the Phoenix people stopped and looked at Zhongli Haoyan, who was staring at her with cold eyes. She smiled contemptuously and said, "Zhongli Haoyan, you are no match for me. Since you want to be a moth to a flame, I will fulfill your wish." After she finished speaking, the Phoenix clan's holy maiden flipped her jade-like palm. Immediately, a dazzling flame erupted from her palm. The flame was scarlet red, and it transformed into a scarlet python. It violently shot out and exploded in front of Zhongli Haoyan. Bang, bang, bang. Zhongli Haoyan's gaze was still calm. She held the divine sword in her right hand and suddenly slashed it out. It was so fast that it seemed to have surpassed the speed of light. The saintess of the Phoenix people's expression changed. Zhuowen's gaze also changed. The saintess of the Phoenix people quickly retreated. The moment she did so, the red python was cut into countless pieces and scattered into countless sparks. The saintess of the Phoenix people landed lightly on the ground. Her beautiful eyes were solemn. Only now did she notice that the front part of her skirt had been completely destroyed. She had no doubt that if her reaction had been a beat slower, her feet would have been crushed. It's actually the flying swallow sword slash. This is Hao Yan's strongest move. It said that this move has a total of 49 moves, and each move is more terrifying than the last. It's like rolling waves, each wave higher than the last. Once enveloped by the flying swallow sword chop, the enemy will have to bear the brunt of the attack. The moment Yi Qi-dong saw Zhong Li Hao Yan's shocking sword, he revealed a serious expression. "Saintess, the flying swallow sword slash has just begun. I wonder if you can last till the end?" Zhong Li Hao Yan's faint voice sounded, like the echo of an empty valley, constantly reverberating in the surroundings. The Phoenix People's Saintess raised her head and immediately saw Zhong Li Hao Yan's emotionless eyes. The moment she used the flying swallow sword slash, Zhong Li Hao Yan's emotions completely disappeared. Her eyes seemed to be completely focused on the divine sword in her hand, unmoved by anything else. Clang, clang, clang. Zhong Li Hao Yan's body was like a swallow, and she closed in on the Phoenix People's Saintess. Once again, she attacked. The sword light was like water, cleansing the lead, and poured down in mid-air, looking so beautiful and fierce. "Zhong Li Hao Yan, do you really think I can't do anything to you?" The Phoenix People's Saintess was furious. She stomped her jade feet, and from the bottom of her feet, circles and circles of flame vortexes suddenly emerged. Boom! The flame vortexes grew bigger and bigger, and finally enveloped the Phoenix People's Saintess. At this moment, the Phoenix People's Saintess was like a proud phoenix, controlling the intense flames and constantly playing with them. Bang, bang, bang. Zhong Li Hao Yan was like a swallow, rapidly circling around the flame vortexes, and the divine sword in her hand constantly slashed out. Every strike was fatal, and every move was terrifying. Terrifying depressions appeared on the flame vortexes, but they still didn't break. Flying swallow slash swallow returns to nest. Suddenly, Zhong Li Hao Yan's faint voice sounded in midair again. Meanwhile, Zhong Li Hao Yan soared into the sky. When she reached a certain height, she suddenly descended. Her speed exceeded the speed of light, and in the blink of an eye, she arrived in front of the flame vortexes. Boundless sword light appeared in front of Zhong Li Hao Yan, and it manifested into a singing swallow with its wings spread open, which landed in the flame vortexes. This is the final technique of the flying swallow slash, and also Hao Yan's most powerful technique. How terrifying! This kind of battle has already exceeded the scope of what we can interfere in. Yi Qi-dong looked at the scene before him with a hint of admiration and loneliness in his eyes. Bang! The flame vortexes suddenly collapsed, and countless sparks burst forth. Amid the sparks, the Saintess of the Phoenix People's Saintess' shocked eyes and fluttering veil could be seen. The swallow let out a loud cry and fell from the sky, landing on the Saintess of the Phoenix People's Saintess. Boom! The terrifying sound of the explosion was accompanied by an endless wave of air that swept out in all directions. Both the human and outsider forces were forced back again and again by this wave of power. Zhuan also took a few steps back. His eyes were very serious as he looked at the battlefield covered by countless clouds of dust. He even used his divine sense to investigate. However, he discovered that the battlefield was completely suppressed by the terrifying auras of Zhong Li Hao Yan and the Saintess of the Phoenix People. Although his divine sense could enter, his perception was greatly weakened, and he couldn't see the specific situation clearly. He only saw a person slowly standing up from the clouds of dust, while another person knelt on one knee on the ground. The person who stood up grabbed the neck of the person kneeling on the ground and threw him out. The person who was thrown out was as helpless as a falling leaf. Zhuan's eyes narrowed. He discovered that the person who was thrown out was flying towards him. When the person broke through the clouds of dust and appeared in front of Zhuan, Zhuan discovered that it was Zhong Li Hao Yan. At this moment, Zhong Li Hao Yan's face was pale, and she was constantly coughing up blood. There was a huge bloody hole in her chest, and a divine sword was stuck in that bloody hole. This divine sword was Zhong Li Hao Yan's sword. Zhuan suddenly rushed out, and caught Zhongli Haoyin in midair. Just as he was about to land on the ground, a blazing aura swept out from the clouds of dust and blasted toward his vital points. Zhuowen snorted coldly and suddenly blasted out his right palm. His palm emitted a sparkling light and collided with the blazing aura. That blazing aura was a flaming python, but it was dispersed by Zhuowen's palm. Zhuowen then landed on the ground with Zhongli Haoyin in his arms. Zhongli Haoyin coughed up another mouthful of blood. Only then did she see that the person who saved her was actually Zhuowen. Cough, cough. Brother Long, you didn't escape? Zhongli Haoyin said weakly. Zhuowen shook his head and did not answer Zhongli Haoyin's words. Instead, he waved at Yao Xiangjuan, who was not far away. Yao Xiangjuan quickly came to Zhuowen's side. Zhuowen handed Zhongli Haoyin to Yao Xiangjuan and said in a deep voice, "Junior sister Yao, I'll leave Ms. Zhongli in your care for a while." Yao Xiangjuan quickly nodded. Her beautiful eyes fell on the clouds of dust in front of them. There, a beautiful figure slowly walked out and said worriedly, "Brother Long, the saintess of the Phoenix people is too terrifying. You." Chapter 30-34. An unprecedented battle at this moment. Both the human race and the alien race had retreated far away. They stared at the beautiful figure slowly walking out from the depths of the dust cloud. Everyone's gazes were filled with respect, fear, and unknown emotions. This human is quite gutsy. After seeing the saintess' true strength, not only did he not run away, he even has the courage to accept her challenge. The alien race member with a human face and a tiger body stabbed his bronze halberd into the ground. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and sneered at Zhuowen, who was still standing at his original spot. On the human side, Yi Qidong and Situ Liangji couldn't help but shake their heads. This Long Wen is simply courting death. Can't he see that the Phoenix people's saintess strength far surpasses all of us here? In everyone's opinion, the Phoenix people's saintess already had the strength to kill an ordinary lord of creation. It was impossible for such a monster to appear in the younger generation of the human race. Only powerful alien races could produce a young genius like the Phoenix people's saintess. Therefore, no one thought that Long Wen would be a match for the Phoenix people's saintess when she unleashed her full strength. Whoosh! The beautiful figure finally walked in, and the dust cloud completely dissipated. Only now did Zhuowen realize that the Phoenix people's saintess ink black hair had already turned fiery red. It was like a flame that constantly danced and fluttered in the wind, burning fiercely. The Phoenix people's saintess fair cheeks were covered in fiery red patterns. These patterns looked like the feathers of some kind of bird. Zhuowen knew that these patterns were in the shape of phoenix feathers. The Phoenix people's saintess glanced at Zhuowen indifferently and revealed a soul-stirring smile. "Long Wen, I didn't think that you would dare to stay and not leave. Could it be that you think you have the strength to fight with me?" Zhuowen shook his head. When the Phoenix people's saintess saw Zhuowen shake his head, the smile on her face became even wider. There was even a hint of mockery in her smile. "Saintess, that's where you're wrong. I should say that you'll definitely lose if you fight me." Zhuowen's next words froze the smile on the Phoenix people's face. "You really have guts. You're about to die, and you still dare to joke with me. Unfortunately, I don't think your joke is very funny." After the Phoenix people's saintess finished speaking, she tapped the ground lightly with her jade-like feet. Like the autumn wind sweeping away fallen leaves, she suddenly swept out and quickly swept towards Zhuowen. Wherever it passed, the air would explode, and there would be loud explosions. It was as if the entire sky was collapsing. After this terrifying explosion, what followed was an extremely terrifying and scorching aura. It was as if his entire body had been thrown into a pill furnace, enduring the unbearable high temperature. It was as if he would be refined into a crystal-clear pill at any time. Zhuowen silently looked at the saintess, who was getting closer and closer. He slowly put his hands together, and a mysterious aura surged out from Zhuowen's body. Zhuan's body began to emit a crystal-clear light. This light became more and more intense and dazzling, like a small sun that was rapidly growing in a short period of time. Zhuan's aura continued to rise at this moment. A ray of light shot up into the sky from his Tianling acupoint, illuminating the earth. Zhuan used the Pangu, sacred body. Of course, he did not explode the full power of the Pangu sacred body. He only used the power of an early 6-star Pangu, sacred body. In his opinion, the power of an early 6-star Pangu sacred body was enough to crush all the young people present. Even the Phoenix People's Saintess, who had been hiding her strength, was no exception. Bang! When Zhuan's aura skyrocketed to the peak, the Phoenix People's Saintess had already arrived in front of Zhuan. She slowly struck out with her white, jade-like hand. This palm seemed slow, but it was just an illusion. In fact, it was extremely fast. It carried with it a scorching aura and a terrifying high temperature. Illusory flames lingered on the surface of her jade-like hand. These flames looked illusory on the surface, but they were actually more terrifying than real flames. Zhuan also struck out with his fist, and the fist force erupted with white light. Bang, bang, bang. The moment the fists and palms collided, there was a dense crackling sound in the air. It was as if someone had fallen from a tall building and was smashed to pieces. The sound was particularly horrifying. Invisible airwaves spread out in a ring shape. The earth was cracking and the air was tumbling. The surrounding people from both the alien race and the human race were all pushed back by the airwaves, away from the battlefield. What a terrifying impact! Will Longwen be able to withstand the palm of the Phoenix People's Saintess? Jiang Qixing hurriedly protected Yao Xiangjuan and the seriously injured Zhongli Haoyan. After retreating to a safe distance, he muttered to himself with a look of horror in his eyes as he faced the terrifying wave of air that swept over. He should be able to. Yao Xiangjuan replied with some hesitation. Then Zhuan definitely won't be able to survive. Didn't you see how terrifying that palm of the Saintess was? It's probably comparable to the attack that injured Haoyan. Yi Qidong, Situ Liangji, and the others arrived not far from Jiang Qixing's group. The one who spoke was Yi Qidong. Jiang Qixing glanced at Yi Qidong with a complicated gaze and didn't answer. Speaking of which, in the human race, Jiang Qixing had known Yi Qidong for much longer than Zhuan. The two of them were the 5 great monstrous geniuses of the host territory. The two of them had a good relationship for many years, and Jiang Qixing admired Yi Qidong greatly. However, Jiang Qixing was somewhat disappointed in Yi Qidong when he had taken a lead to stand by and watch Zhuan's matter. Yi Qidong also noticed Jiang Qixing's abnormality and thought of the reason, so he tactfully didn't continue speaking. Instead, his gaze fell on the battlefield in front of him. Although Yi Qidong felt that Zhuan wouldn't be able to withstand the palm of the Phoenix People's Saintess, he had a premonition that Longwen wasn't an ordinary person and wouldn't die just like that. Bang, bang, bang. In the center of the battlefield, smoke and dust tumbled like the tide in the sea. It was so thick that it was impossible to see the situation in the center of the battlefield. The battlefield, which had been silent for a while, suddenly erupted with the sound of explosions one after another. As for the smoke and dust that permeated the air, it became even more intense due to the huge commotion within the battlefield. The degree of shaking was even greater and more intense than before. As long as one wasn't a fool, they would know that the battle was still ongoing. Brother Long. Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan's eyes lit up. They knew that Longwen wouldn't be killed so easily. The smoke and dust in the battlefield became more and more intense. Clearly, the battle was also becoming more and more intense. Suddenly, a wild gale swept over, sweeping away a large amount of smoke and dust in the battlefield. Chapter 30-35. Arousing the bloodline in this messy battlefield. The two figures were like two peerless gods of war as they constantly clashed. Violent energy overflowed in all directions, and the entire space seemed to be split apart. Boom! A thunder-like loud sound was transmitted from the figures that had once again collided. Immediately, countless energy ripples spread and burst apart. The two figures separated upon contact. Each of them withdrew thousands of steps and stood opposite each other in the distant empty space. At this moment, Zhuan's body was sparkling and translucent, as if he was made of glass. He looked so perfect and flawless. The Phoenix People's Saintess was wrapped in fiery red energy, and her exposed skin was covered in dense patterns. These patterns were in the shape of phoenix feathers, flickering and emitting an extraordinary aura. This human, where did he come from? How can he fight against the Saintess with a 99 phoenix body and not be at a disadvantage? The foreign race that had retreated to the other side, the one with a human face and a tiger body, trembled as he looked at the sparkling and translucent Zhuan in disbelief. And for some reason, the aura on Zhuan's body made him have an impulse to worship him. This impulse was very strange and inexplicable. It wasn't just this foreign race with a human face and a tiger body. The other foreign races around also had this feeling. If it weren't for the fact that they still had some rationality, they might have all knelt on the ground and worshipped Zhuan. So powerful. Is this Brother Long's greatest strength? Even the Phoenix People's Saintess can't do anything to him. Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan were pleasantly surprised. Yi Qidong, Situ Liangji, and the others were all stunned and silent, not saying a word. On the other hand, Zhongli Haoyin sat up with difficulty, her beautiful eyes looking at Zhuan's figure like a peerless god of war, and said with a bitter smile, "I didn't expect this long one to be so powerful. Before, I said that I would help him block for a while, but it seems that was completely unnecessary. I'm just showing off in front of an expert." "Your body." The Phoenix People's Saintess stared at Zhuan's translucent body and said in a deep voice, "You don't have a human body at all? Who are you?" "I'm just a body refinement cultivator with no special background. I'm just an ordinary member of the human race. As for you, your 99 Phoenix body is actually so powerful. As expected of the powerful physique that the Phoenix people rarely encounter in 10,000 years. Zhuan looked at the flames around the Phoenix People's Saint. These flames were very difficult to deal with. They seemed to be able to burn everything. There was nothing that could not be burned. Every time Zhuan fought with the Holy Maiden, the flames that would suddenly burst out of her body were very difficult to deal with. Hearing Zhuan's praise, the Saintess of the Phoenix people lifted her chin slightly, revealing a trace of pride. She had always been the prodigy of the Phoenix people and had received countless praises and respect. She was already used to being praised. However, this was the first time she had been praised by someone of the same generation whose strength was not any weaker than hers. Therefore, even though she had always been calm, there were some fluctuations in her emotions, and a complicated feeling was born. "You're not bad either. My 99 Phoenix body is already one of the top physiques in this galaxy. There are only a few people who can compare to my physique. However, you can fight with me with your physical body. Your body is definitely not ordinary. It's not something that can be controlled by humans. What kind of physique do you have?" The Phoenix People's Saintess' beautiful eyes were clear. She stared at Zhuan quietly, as if she wanted to see through Zhuan completely. "If you want to know the whereabouts of my physique, you have to tell me your real name first." Zhuan stared at the Phoenix People's Saintess. If he wanted to find out more about Mu Qinxue from the Saintess, he had to understand her background first. Mu Qinxue definitely had the 99 Phoenix body. However, the Saintess in front of him also had the 99 Phoenix body. This made Zhuan a little anxious and worried. This was because he could not link this Saintess in front of him to Mu Qinxue. He had already concluded that this woman was not Mu Qinxue at all. However, he still wanted to know who this woman was. Also, where was Mu Qinxue? "I can't tell you that." The Phoenix People's Saintess shook her head and replied coldly. "Then do you know a woman named Mu Qinxue?" Zhuan asked anxiously. The Phoenix People's Saintess paused for a moment. Her beautiful eyes suddenly narrowed, but she quickly replied calmly, "I don't know her." At this moment, Zhuan had already caught the change in the Saintess's eyes. He was sure that this saintess had definitely heard of Mu Chinchua's name. Otherwise, it would be impossible for her to have such a subtle change in expression just now. That change in expression was definitely not the change in expression of someone who did not know Mu Chinchua. It seems that you don't intend to tell me what your physique is. However, it doesn't matter. I will defeat you directly and then capture you alive. When the time comes, I will extract your soul and torture it until you tell me the truth. The Phoenix People's saintess formed a seal with her right hand and pointed at her glabella. A blazing white flame burst out from her glabella. Immediately, the flame condensed into a phoenix pattern on the surface of her glabella. Whoosh! The moment the phoenix pattern formed, it actually left the glabella of the Phoenix People's saintess and turned into a huge illusion of a phoenix spreading its wings and soaring high in the sky. A high-pitched phoenix cry resounded between heaven and earth. The illusion of the phoenix soared into the sky. Its huge phoenix eyes swept across heaven and earth with a sense of majesty and pride. Then, the illusion of the phoenix let out another phoenix cry and immediately swooped down. It was not rushing toward Zhuowen, but the Phoenix People's saintess below. The huge illusion of the phoenix completely fell on the body of the Phoenix People's saintess. The surrounding air was swept away by waves of terrifying heat waves. The surrounding temperature rose by several times. The Phoenix People's saintess was like a phoenix reborn from the ashes. She slowly walked out of the endless flames. At this moment, the Phoenix People's saintess did not change much. The only change was that on her back, a pair of huge phoenix wings that were hundreds of feet wide opened. They were so dazzling, so bright, and so breathtaking. The saintess has completely activated the power of the 99 phoenix body. This time, the saintess is really serious. The alien with a human face and a tiger body had a serious expression. Chapter 3036. Bloodline Boundary. The saintess of the Phoenix clan gently stroked her burning hair. Her fiery red eyes looked at Zhuowen. She looked very seriously, as if she wanted to see through the aura of fear on his body. However, what surprised her was that the young man in front of her had no fear on his face. His eyes were as clear as water, and in the depths of those clear eyes, she could see a burning desire to fight. Yes, that's right. It was the desire to fight. Interesting. After I completely release the power of my bloodline and reach the state of transcendence, you can still remain so calm. Not bad. It's a pity that you're going to die soon. You're going to die under my power. The Phoenix People's holy maiden spoke as if she was minding her own business. Her jade-like feet lightly tapped the void. Immediately, the void beneath her feet rippled like water. The holy maiden's movements were very elegant. Like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, her jade-like feet tapped the void. Then the entire space seemed to freeze. The freezing of space only lasted for a short while. Soon after, the space shattered and the sound of something shattering could be heard. Behind the shattering sound, waves of flames surged. The surrounding flames were so magnificent, but also so terrifying and bone-piercing. The transparent void in Zhuowen's eyes had turned into an endless sea of flames. He was like a helpless person trapped in the sea of flames. In the endless sea of flames, the holy maiden's jade-like feet slowly stepped out. Her movements were graceful and slow, and the direction she was walking towards was exactly where Zhuowen was. Zhuowen only felt that the pressure around him was getting stronger and stronger. It was as if he had dived 10,000 meters into the vast ocean. The terrifying water pressure kept pressing down on his body, wanting to crush every inch of his flesh, blood, and bones. Is this a domain? Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He did not struggle, but instead raised his head and looked at the holy maiden who was walking slowly towards him. I admire your calmness, but even so, you're going to die today. This is not a domain, but the boundary of my bloodline. Those who are within the boundary of my bloodline will not have freedom. Everything will be under my control. Long One, Your fate today is to be burned to death by this sea of flames, alone and helpless within my bloodline boundary. But you can be very proud today, because you're the first human to force me to use my bloodline boundary. Compared to Zhongli and Hao Yin, I think you're the real #1 genius of the human race. The Holy Maiden was still walking. Although the distance between them was very short, she walked very slowly, as if she was deliberately dragging her feet. Before you die, you still have some value. I need to ask you some questions. Where did you hear the name Mu? She said coldly. Where? Zhuo Wen's heart throbbed when he saw the malevolence in the Holy Maiden's eyes. An unprecedented rage surged in his chest. This Holy Maiden knew about Mu Qinxue, but this Holy Maiden had hidden it from him. As for why she hid it, Zhuo knew that Mu Qinshue's situation was not good. Qinshui, where is she now? Zhuo suppressed his anger and looked at the Holy Maiden's teasing eyes as he asked in a deep voice. You can't even protect yourself, but you're still in the mood to ask about Mu Qinxue. Also, you have to remember the primary and secondary relationship. I'm the one asking you now, not you asking me. Do you understand? The Holy Maiden finally arrived in front of Zhuo, her eyes filled with teasing. Can't protect myself? Are you sure? A strange smile suddenly appeared on Zhuo Wen's face. Soon after, an even more vast and terrifying power began to surge from within his body. Zhuo Wen's body became even more crystal clear, and his aura became even more vast. Kacha! Zhuo Wen's aura continued to rise, from the early stage to the mid-stage of 6-star, and finally reached the late stage. That terrifying aura actually suppressed the Holy Maiden's aura after activating her bloodline. Even the Holy Maiden's bloodline boundary began to crack under this terrifying aura, shattering into countless pieces. The moment he broke through the bloodline boundary, Zhuo's right fist pierced through the sky and slammed towards the Holy Maiden. The Phoenix People's Holy Maiden clearly did not expect this to happen. She was still in a daze when she realized that Zhuo's fist was already coming towards her. This fist was too terrifying. Just the fist pressure alone made her feel suffocated. If she was hit by this fist, she would definitely be seriously injured. Fortunately, the Holy Maiden's reaction was fast enough. The pair of giant phoenix wings on her back quickly closed, blocking in front of her and tightly wrapping her up. It's just the wings of a mixed bird. You dare to act so fierce in front of me. Zhuo's eyes were gloomy and cold. The fist force completely landed on the wings. It was like a rainbow piercing through the sun. It actually directly blasted through the wings. The fist with a blazing white light penetrated the wings and finally landed on the chest of the Phoenix People's Holy Maiden. Countless fire plumes scattered in the sky. The Phoenix People's Holy Maiden looked up and spat out a mouthful of blood. Her whole body bent backward and fell downwards like a powerless butterfly. The moment the fist hit the Phoenix People's Holy Maiden, Zhuo's heart palpitated slightly. He quickly came back to his senses. He bent his right knee and pressed down hard, rapidly falling downwards. Zhuo naturally would not miss this opportunity to beat a drowning dog while it was down. However, the moment he was about to approach the Holy Maiden, the veil on her face fluttered in the wind, revealing the peerless appearance under the veil. Her appearance was so exquisite and so familiar. The moment Zhuo saw her, his mind went blank and he lost all thoughts. At this moment, the Holy Maiden's beautiful eyes suddenly opened. Her bent wings closed again and separated from her back, turning into a giant wheel of fire. The wheel of fire roared and slammed into the chest of the dazed Zhuo. Puchi! The wheel of fire was too terrifying. It was the most terrifying attack condensed by the wings of the phoenix. Zhuo's chest was directly cut open, torn apart, smashed, and finally exploded into a cloud of blood. After the last attack, the Phoenix People's Holy Maiden's face became even paler, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. She grabbed Zhuo's spirit ring and did not want to stay here any longer. She immediately took out a fiery red escape talisman and crushed it. Her whole body turned into a fiery light and disappeared on the spot. She knew that this Zhuowen was dead for sure. Since she had obtained Zhuowen's spirit ring, there was no need for her to stay here any longer. On top of that, her injuries were far too severe. If she were to stay here any longer, it would be a real headache if the other humans were to launch a sneak attack on her. Chapter 37. Long, Wind's Tomb Boom. Zhuowen's badly damaged body fell from the sky. The sound of his body crashing into the ground was extremely heavy. The saintess of the Phoenix people had left, and the foreign races in the distance did not stay there any longer. Brother Long, Jiang Qixing, and Yao Shangjuan shouted and immediately came to Zhuowen's side. Looking at Zhuowen's mutilated body, their hearts trembled and their eyes were filled with sadness. They realized that Zhuowen's body was terribly damaged. They also used their divine senses to check Zhuowen's divine soul and found that Zhuowen's divine soul was also fragmented and completely gone. They knew that Zhuowen had completely fallen. Zhongli Haoyan dragged her severely injured body and slowly walked over. Looking at Zhuowen's mutilated body, she could not help but close her beautiful eyes. There was a trace of sadness and confusion on her pretty face. Brother Long, why was he distracted at the last moment? Zhongli Haoyan sighed and voiced the doubts in her heart. The moment Zhuowen unleashed the power of the late-stage 5-star Pangu's sacred body, it was as if the whole world had collapsed and the sky had become unreal. Zhongli Haoyan could clearly feel how powerful and terrifying Zhuowen was at that time. She did not know that even the bloodline limit of the Phoenix people's saintess was crushed by Zhuowen's sudden burst of power. After Zhuowen unleashed such a terrifying power, the Phoenix people's saintess could not resist at all. Even the defense formed by the Phoenix wings was broken. There is no doubt that the Phoenix people's saintess was no match for Zhuowen at that time. If Zhuowen had not been distracted at the last moment, the Phoenix people's saintess would not have been able to seize the opportunity to launch her strongest attack. Zhuowen would not have been ambushed by the Phoenix people's saintess and died directly. Zhongli Haoyan's doubts were also the same as Yao Shangjuan and Jiang Qixing's. They could not figure out why Zhuowen would be distracted at the most critical moment. Haoyan, our purpose in coming to the Door of Darkness was to obtain the ancestral witch's essence blood. Now that we have obtained it, we can leave. Yi Qidong walked forward and said to Zhongli Haoyan. Zhongli Haoyan frowned slightly and looked at Yi Qidong indifferently. She shook her head and said, "You guys go first. I owe Brother Long a favor, so I must take care of his funeral matters before I leave." Yi Qidong and Situ Liangji looked at each other, knowing that Zhongli Haoyan was alienating them. Although they were displeased, there was nothing they could do. They bid farewell to Zhongli Haoyan, Jiang Qixing, and the others and left. Jiang Qixing looked at Yi Qidong's back as he left, his eyes slightly disappointed. Later, when the Phoenix people's saintess revealed her true strength, they could not help except for Zhongli Haoyan. However, they were all willing to stand up for Zhuowen and support him. If not for Zhuowen, then for Zhuowen's contribution of saving the human race, they should have made a statement. Unfortunately, Yi Qidong chose to stand by and watch in the end, so Jiang Qixing was quite disappointed in his good friend. "I've only met Brother Long once. You two are Brother Long's friends. What do you plan to do with his corpse? If you know Brother Long's origins, you can take his body back to his hometown and return to his roots." Zhongli Haoyan's beautiful eyes looked at Zhuowen's body, then at Jiang Qixing and Yao Shangjuan. "To be honest, although we are Brother Long's friends, we met in the Door of Darkness. I only know that he was a loose cultivator. As for his specific origins, we don't know anything at all." Jiang Qixing said a little awkwardly. "By the way, my Yujia is Brother Long's good friend. He knew Brother Long much longer than we did. Maybe he knows something?" Yao Shangjuan suddenly said. Jiang Qixing's eyes were slightly gloomy as he sighed. "I think my Yujia has already slipped away. I don't know where he is now, and I tried to contact him with a communication talisman, but there was no reply. Obviously, that guy deliberately didn't reply to me. When Jiang Qixing said this, there was some hatred in his eyes. Obviously, he was unhappy with my Yujia's lack of loyalty. Yao Xiangjuan's beautiful eyes darkened. Her thoughts were much more meticulous than Jiang Qixing's. In the process of interacting with my Yujia and Zhuan, she noticed that there was always a faint hostility between Zhuan and my Yujia. She knew that my Yujia was not necessarily Zhuan's good friend. It was very likely that they were enemies. It was just that they entered the door of darkness with the same goal, so they cooperated to enter it together. Since my Yujia had already obtained his goal, it was naturally impossible for him to continue following Zhuan. It was better to part ways as soon as possible. Zhongli Haoyin looked disappointed. She said, "We don't even know Brother Long's origin. What should we do with his body?" "Cremate it first," Jiang Qixing said. "It seems that's the only way." Zhongli Haoyin nodded. She immediately waved her sleeve and summoned a divine fire that enveloped Zhuan's body. However, Zhongli Haoyin soon discovered that Zhuan's body was not damaged at all under the divine fire. It still shone with a sparkling light, but it was much dimmer than before. What a powerful body! My divine fire can't burn Brother Long's body at all, Zhongli Haoyin said in surprise. Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan were also shocked, but they quickly recovered. No wonder Brother Long dared to fight the Phoenix People's Saintess who activated the 99 Phoenix body. It turns out that his body is not simple. With the strength of Brother Long's body, I'm afraid many foreign races can't compare to it. Jiang Qixing clicked his tongue in wonder. He looked at Zhuan's body and couldn't help but murmur in admiration. Zhongli Haoyin put away her divine fire and looked at Zhuan's body that was still intact. She said helplessly, "My divine fire can't do anything to Brother Long's body. It's obviously impossible to cremate it. There's no need to cremate it. Let's just bury Brother Long's body here. This is the deepest part of the door of darkness, and it's also the place where ancestor Shaman Gongong's body is kept. Not many people can enter this place, so Brother Long won't be disturbed if he's buried here," Yao Xiangjuan said in a deep voice. Jiang Qixing and Zhongli Haoyin glanced at Yao Xiangjuan and nodded. They agreed with Yao Xiangjuan's suggestion. In terms of quietness, this was indeed a good place to be buried. After all, even an ancestor shaman like Gongong chose this place. It was obvious that the feng shui here was excellent. After the three of them decided, they found a better area around the sorcerer god's altar, dug a hole, and placed Zhuan's body in it. After the grave was done, the three of them erected a tombstone in front of Zhuan's grave and wrote the words Tomb of Dragon Rune. Chapter 3038, the deep in thought. Not long after Zhongli, Haoyin, and the others left, Zhuan's grave suddenly broke open, and a hand reached out from the grave. Then, a figure slowly crawled out of the grave. Cough, cough. This figure was Zhuan. Zhuan coughed a few times, then lay on his back and looked at the empty sky above. At this moment, Zhuan's body was almost cut in half. The huge wound extended from his right shoulder to the left side of his abdomen, and blood was constantly gushing out from the huge wound. However, Zhuan's body was constantly emitting a faint green light. Under the cover of this green light, Zhuan's injury was under control and gradually began to recover. But the recovery was very slow. Damn it, the firewall manifested by the phoenix wings is so terrifying. It almost killed me. Zhuan looked at the slow recovery speed of his body and couldn't help but curse secretly. His Panga's sacred body was integrated with the Gomang parasite, and the latter was a parasite that focused on healing energy. Ordinary injuries could be healed instantly. However, the moment Zhuan was hit by the fire wheel of the phoenix wings, Zhuan felt that he had lost control of his body, and his consciousness had completely disappeared in that time and space. However, before his consciousness collapsed, Zhuan timely put his original body into the great world. It could be said that at that moment, the doppelganger had indeed died, and even the doppelganger's divine soul had been destroyed. However, since his original body was fine, he could naturally use his divine soul to awaken the energy of the Gomang parasite in the doppelganger and begin to heal the doppelganger's damaged body. However, the doppelganger's degree of damage was too serious, and the fire wheel of the phoenix wings was extremely high in energy, so the effect of his recovery was greatly reduced. The doppelganger sat cross-legged not far from the sorcerer god's altar and began to silently heal his injuries. The great world turned into a speck of dust and fell on the doppelganger's shoulder. His original body was in the great world and was lost in thought. Zhuowen remembered the moment when the Phoenix people's saintess veil fluttered and her face was seen. He was 100% sure that it was Mu Qinshue's face. However, other than her face, her temperament, demeanor, and eyes were completely different from the Mu Qinshu in his impression. The two of them were not the same person. It was at that moment that Zhuowen saw Mu Qinshue's face. That was why Zhuowen's heart palpitated and he was distracted, allowing the saintess to find a flaw. However, now that Zhuowen thought about it, he was sure that it was not the real Mu Qinshu, and he also paid attention to some details. Although the Holy Maiden's appearance was very similar to Mu Qinshue's, in retrospect, there were still some differences in some details. After all, if Mu Qinshu really appeared in front of him, even if she was wearing a veil, Zhuowen could easily recognize her. As for this saintess, even if she took off her veil, she still gave Zhuowen a strange feeling that was hard to describe. That Phoenix people's saintess is definitely not Qinshui. Zhuowen came to this conclusion. His eyes were cold, but he knew that the Phoenix people's saintess definitely knew where Mu Qinshu was. Otherwise, when he mentioned Mu Qinshu before, this Phoenix people's saintess would not have lost her composure, even asking him why he knew Mu Qinshue's name. Also, after Zhuowen's clone was destroyed, Zhuowen could have used his main body soul to activate the Gomang Gu in the clone to restore it. However, Zhuowen did not do this. He waited for Zhongli and Hao Yin to bury the clone's body and leave before he began to restore the clone's body. He only had one goal in doing this, which was to let everyone think that he, Long One, had died. Zhuowen was very clear that if he did not die, the news of him obtaining the ancestral Witch Gonggong would be spread. Then when he left the Door of Darkness, he would be faced with an endless pursuit. Now that he, the Longwind name, had died in the hands of the Phoenix people's saintess, and his spirit ring had been taken away by the Phoenix people's saintess, he knew that everyone's eyes would no longer be on a dead person like him, but rather the Phoenix people's saintess. This was what Zhuowen thought when his clone was killed by the Phoenix people's saintess sneak attack. I have to return to the outside world first. That Phoenix people's saintess should soon realize that there is nothing in my spirit ring. I'm afraid she will come back here again. Zhuowen's gaze became extremely serious. He waved his sleeve and swept away all the tombstones erected by Zhongli and Hao Yin beside the sorcerer god's altar. After making sure that there were no other traces left behind, his clone went into the outside world. The outside world turned into an inconspicuous speck of dust and drifted towards the outside world in an orderly manner. Sure enough, not long after Zhuowen left, a fiery red figure returned to the sorcerer god's altar. After the fiery red figure carefully searched the surroundings of the sorcerer god's altar and did not find anything else, she said hatefully, "Long One, how dare you set me up? If I see you again, I will never forgive you." This fiery red figure was naturally the Phoenix people's saintess who had returned. Moreover, this saintess had brought a group of people with her. Among them, the person with a human face and a tiger's body followed the saintess closely with a fawning smile on his face. "Saintess, if what you said is right, and there's really nothing in Longwind's spirit ring, then where would Longwind place the inheritance of the sorcerer ancestor, Gonggong?" The person with a human face and a tiger's body asked with flickering eyes. The Phoenix people's saintess coldly glanced at the person with a human face and a tiger's body and said, "Are you saying that you suspect that I am lying? I wouldn't dare. Saintess, you are born with a 9-9 Phoenix body. You are the #1 genius of the Phoenix people and a world-renowned genius in the primitive heaven realm. Only you, Saintess, are qualified to inherit the inheritance of the sorcerer ancestor, Gong Gong. You are the most suitable person to inherit the inheritance. How could I dare to have any objections? The person with a human face and a tiger's body trembled as he hurriedly bent down and explained with trembling jaws. Oomph. It would be fine if I got the inheritance, but I didn't. It was Long, one who set a trap for me to fall into. You guys continue to search here and see if you can find Long One, the Saintess of the Phoenix people said coldly. The person with a human face and a tiger's body and the other people did not dare to disobey the Saintess's order. They hurriedly cupped their hands, nodded and bowed as they agreed. Then, they began to search around the sorcerer god's altar. However, after searching for a while, they all returned in disappointment and shook their heads at the Saintess. Let's go. Let's go back first. Although Long One is dead, and the inheritance is not in his spirit ring, there is only one possibility. This person gave the inheritance to someone else in advance, and it is very likely that it was his 2 friends. The Saintess of the Phoenix people narrowed her eyes as she thought of Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing. She remembered that these 2 people seemed to have a good relationship with Zhuowen. If she guessed correctly, then Long One must have given the important thing to one of these 2 people. After deciding on the direction, Zhuowen rushed in that direction. Along the way, Zhuowen basically did not see any other cultivators. He knew that most of the cultivators should know that the Gonggongu's inheritance had been taken away. Obviously, they did not want to continue staying here. Even though there might be many good things hidden here, there were also many dangers. Who knew if they would enter some terrifying danger zone in the next moment and then die? Soon, Zhuowen arrived at the end. He found that there was actually a short mountain at the end. This short mountain was very unremarkable. It was bare without even weeds. Zhuowen circled around the short mountain and stopped at the back of the short mountain. He saw a mottled white formation at the back of the short mountain. This formation looked like it was drawn with chalk. It did not feel real. It's a teleportation formation. This formation was drawn with an ancient method. Zhuowen could only tell that this formation was a teleportation formation. As for the rest, he really could not tell. Zhuowen took out a high-grade heavenly path origin crystal and placed it on the formation. Then, he formed a seal with both hands. The formation was activated, and Zhuowen disappeared from the formation. When Zhuowen opened his eyes, what entered his eyes was an unfamiliar scene. He was in a ruin. He was not unfamiliar with this ruin. It was one of the countless ruins in the dark ancient city. The aura here was too familiar to him. Looks like I've left the door of darkness. This looks like the periphery of the dark ancient city. Zhuowen looked around. The confusion in his eyes quickly faded. He thought that he would be directly teleported outside the door of darkness. Now, it seemed that he was overthinking. Zhuowen was about to leave the ruins and go to the door of darkness to take a look when he smelled blood in the corner of the ruins. Then, he saw 5 corpses lying in the southeast corner of the ruins. Among the 5 corpses, 1 belonged to a foreign race, while the other 4 belonged to the human clan. From the wide-open eyes of the 4 corpses, Zhuowen could tell that the 4 humans must have seen something unbelievable before they died. On the other hand, the foreign race corpse's face was full of indifference. Although it had fallen, there was a trace of fanaticism on its face. He knew that this was the last expression the foreign race showed before they died. Strange. The human clan and the foreign race should have formed a temporary alliance in the dark ancient city. Why would they suddenly kill each other? Zhuowen looked at the 5 corpses. He knew that the 4 humans must have died together with the foreign race corpse. Although the foreign race had united to kill the human clan team in the Door of Darkness, it was the foreign race who had betrayed them first. However, outside the Door of Darkness, there were high-level experts of both the human clan and the foreign race stationed there. If a battle broke out, it would not just disappear. It would probably cause a huge uproar. The battle would definitely be terrifying. Before obtaining the ancestral witch's blood essence, how could the human clan and the foreign race easily start a war? Unless the human clan knew that the ancestral witch Gongon's inheritance had been obtained by the Phoenix people Saintis, and the human clan had obtained several bottles of ancestral witch's blood essence. This made the two sides feel unbalanced, so they started a war without regard for anything else. This person's communication jade talisman is ringing. Let's see what it is. Zhuowen realized that things might not have happened as he had imagined. When the communication jade talisman on the waist of one of the human corpses lit up, he immediately took it. Putting down the communication jade talisman, Zhuowen's expression became very serious. He finally knew that the human clan and the foreign race had suddenly started a war in the Dark Ancient City. In other words, the war between the human clan and the foreign race in the Dark Ancient City was only the tip of the iceberg. This was because the 10 major races of the foreign race had united again. When the human clan and the foreign race were searching for ancestral witch Gongon's corpse, they had once again appeared on the Starry Sky battlefield and launched a general attack on the human clan's Starry Sky Tower. Right now, the Dark Ancient City was exceptionally quiet. It was a deathly silence, which was a great contrast to the scene when the human race and the non-human race had come to explore. On the way to the Dark Gate, Zhuowen saw all kinds of ruins along the way, as well as the corpses of humans and aliens scattered on the ruins of the Dark Ancient City. However, overall, there were more human corpses than alien corpses. From the condition of these corpses, Zhuowen guessed that the sudden war between the human race and the alien race should have happened 4 or 5 days ago. Coincidentally, it happened to be the time when the alien race joined forces to encircle and annihilate the human race inside the Door of Darkness. It seemed that at that time, the alien race outside had already sent an army to invade the human race. The closer he got to the Door of Darkness, the more human and alien corpses he saw. They were not scattered, but floating in batches. Zhuowen was very vigilant. His speed was not fast, but he was unusually cautious. Like a black leopard hunting at night, he tried his best to hide and not let himself be exposed. 10 days later, Zhuowen landed in the ruins closest to the Door of Darkness. He restrained his aura, and his eyes were unprecedentedly dignified. The ruins were almost completely broken, and the damage was very serious. From the huge gullies and ruins, Zhuowen could see that these damages should have been caused recently. He could also feel a biting cold, killing intent from these damaged parts. These killing intents should have been left behind by the people who had fought in the past. There were too many corpses in the ruins, almost piled up into a small mountain. He even saw some familiar faces among these corpses. They were all cultivators he had seen in the human and alien race teams at the Door of Darkness. The moment Zhuowen landed in the ruins, he had already used his divine sense to scan the ruins. There were no living people in the ruins, only dead people. He could have continued to move forward and go to the Door of Darkness, but he did not. This was because the moment he arrived near the ruins, he felt a terrifying battle fluctuation. He was sure that the battle fluctuation should have come from the Door of Darkness in front of him. Zhuowen's heart sank. He knew that there was a great battle at the entrance of the Door of Darkness. Without thinking, he knew that it should be a battle between the supreme experts of the human race and the alien race. Although the ruins were the closest to the Door of Darkness, the actual distance was not short. With Zhuowen's speed, it should take about an hour to reach the Door of Darkness from here. However, the battle fluctuation could be transmitted so far away. One could imagine how terrifying the battle near the Door of Darkness was. Zhuowen's eyes flashed, but he still decided to go over and take a look. Of course, he could not just go over like this. The probability of being discovered was too high. As long as I escape into the space-time tunnel, then use the art of heavenly divination to change the fate aura on my body. As long as I don't expose myself and silently observe in the space-time tunnel, it will not be so easy for an early-stage master to discover me. Zhuowen muttered in a low voice, then used the power of space-time to escape into the space-time tunnel. He escaped into the deepest and most complicated space-time tunnel, and used the art of heavenly divination to conceal the fate aura on his body. The speed of the space-time tunnel was far faster than the outside world. Zhuowen only took a few steps and arrived not far from the door of darkness. Zhuowen stood silently in the space-time tunnel, silently observing the outside world through the information transmitted by space-time. Soon, he found that not far from the door of darkness, there were two groups of people fighting to the death. These two groups were naturally the human side and the foreign side. With a single glance, Zhuowen could tell that these two groups of humans and outsiders were the ones who had entered the door of darkness. However, the number of humans and foreign side was much smaller than before he had entered the door of darkness. Zhuowen knew that those who were missing had basically all died in battle. On the human side, Senki Yin, Xiang Puyu, and Xiaojin were all present. The three of them were early-stage master, leaders of Dao Palace forces, and their strength was unfathomable. In addition, Zhuowen discovered that an ordinary-looking old man erupted with an aura that was not the slightest bit weaker than Senki Yin's group. Clearly, this ordinary-looking old man was also a master of Heaven's Transcendence Realm. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.